Yeah, let's see. That looks a little better there. So hopefully everybody can hear me now. What's going on, O'Sheen? Yeah, we're here tonight. I guess somebody thought we wasn't going to be on. I didn't feel real good, but I didn't say anything that we wouldn't be running tonight. So yeah, I'll uh I'll make a post in the militia page if we're not going to be on, or in the other page. What's going on, everybody? What's up, CB? Clint? O'Sheen? All right, let me get some links out to everybody. Let me send a link or Clint the main link first. Okay. Yeah, I'm on my new computer now. The screen looks a little different. I guess it's going through just a Windows default, so it's not going to be as clear. I can see it looks real grainy. So next week we'll be set up with the Logitech drivers and everything. I've got a few issues I've got to resolve with this new build, but at least it's up. I got Oshina resolved the issue was the RAM. The RAM wasn't being recognized. It was a good deal on that Patriot RAM, but it just didn't like it. All right, let me send Clint the shortcut for the show. But if something happens, he can jump in there. All right, now let me get links. Oh, about to send out last week's link. Oh, hell. Okay, that looks a little better. Yeah, when I first opened it up, the video, my camera video looks really, really pixelated and bad. I was like, man, tell me it's not that bad. Because I didn't have, I did a little test just to see if the camera was working, but that's all I did, and I didn't test it on that. So hopefully that'll be better. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, let me get these links out, and then we'll get to chatting here. Should have pre-opened these. I usually do, but I had to use the bathroom real quick before the show started. I try to use it before the show starts so I don't have to leave in the middle of the show to use the bathroom. So let's see if they're going to let me share them all this week, or it changes from day to day. All right. So bear with me just a minute and let me get these shared. That's the worst part. I wish I could just click through all of them and send it all at once to every one of them, but I don't know. Sometimes I can share certain things that way. I can just check off the boxes, right, for all the different groups I want to share to. But for some reason, when I do these, it doesn't do that for me. I have to manually go into each group. I also want to wish Damon Beatty happy birthday today. Oh, Damon. Smurf Daddy's birthday. Oh, Papa Smurf. He's getting old. Had to have some kind of injection in his joints. He's an old man. I don't know what it was. It sounded something like I'd never heard of it before. I guess it was something that's like your synovial fluid in your joints. So, what's everybody up to this week? Hopefully, it's warmed up here nicely today. We got up to 67. 67 the high here today. And tomorrow, the low is going to be like 22. That's Kentucky. That's why that barrel aging does so well here. All those temp swings back and forth all spring and all fall. I always say, if you don't like the weather here in Kentucky, wait a day or two. It'll change. But we're getting pretty mild summers, so I don't think we had too many 100-degree days this year, so that's always nice. That's when I really can't stand it. The cold I don't like, be out in it, but it's hard to escape that heat. You can always dress up for the cold, but you can only get so naked when it gets hot. A few more and we'll be done. I hate this dead air time. Hopefully Clint's entertaining everybody with his juggling chickens. Yeah, we went to grocery shopping and we went to Texas Roadhouse and had dinner. And I love that. It's kind of the same thing as a blooming onion. I don't know. They call it Texas onion or something. I don't know. I love those things, but man, when I ate them, that onion and that fried and all that grease, it was a little bit of soggy this time. And yeah, it works on the old tummy a bit. I love them. It's a good deal too. It's like $9 for a big, huge. I mean, you can't get a order of onion rings for $8 or $9. $6, $8 for normal onion ring. You get about 4 or 5 of them. Man, this big ass onion, you eat on that. We brought it home. We'll eat on it twice. Let's see. Tracy Bumgunner got a post on his page. Him working on a steel. He gets some high-end clientele. Tracy does. Pretty good old boy. If y'all haven't met him, you should definitely meet him. He's a good guy. Oh, Ann tiptoeing past. I think she's doing laundry. I don't know how well this mic eliminates background noise. Hopefully I don't hear a lot of background noise. I don't know. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I know a lot of people say it's better than the old mic, a lot better than the old mic. So that's that's the important thing. I want to make sure that it's people can understand me because I tend to mumble a little bit from time to time. All right, let's see. I'm a mile behind already. See, that's what it is. This is what gets me behind right here, starting out like that. 10 minutes behind already. Yeah, I got the G. It wasn't the GPU, it was the RAM. So I noticed the board, it doesn't, I didn't have, of course, nobody put speakers on their boards or TED anymore, but there's a code on it that you look at the light and it was yellow. And they said, "Oh, just try one stick." And I tried one stick, and it went from red to yellow. And they're like, "Oh, that's not good." And so, like, it's got to be the RAM. So I sent that in. Had 4 days left. If I hadn't called in, if I'd waited, I was going to like, oh, I'll just get it to it next week. I'll worry about it Monday or Tuesday. And this was Thursday or Friday, and so I got an RMA and I looked at it. Had 4 days left on the return, and I'm like, wow, I'd hate to have gotten stuck with that RAM. So I had to spend a little bit more for the other RAM, and it's not quite. It's got a little bit more latency. Not a whole lot. It's a 36 instead of a 30, so it's not too bad. But yeah, it's that DDR5, so it ain't cheap. But yeah, it fixed it. Everything just fired right up, man. I was happy. What's going on, Steve? Good to see you, brother. What's up, Scott? You on time, man. On time. Good deal, brother. Do malted grains have all sugars converted, or do they still need diastatic powers? It depends. It depends on the. Now, you have to calculate the diastatic power based on the type of grain it is, and like a 6-row is going to have less or more diastatic power than a 2-row, and a malted wheat is going to have more diastatic power than a malted barley. Generally, if it's malted properly, right? I got to keep conscious. I can't put my feet up. That new computer's down there. I'm going to have to move it. I'm going to have to redo everything here at my desk, and because it was so dirty down there, I can't do it. But anyway, so everything has different diastatic power. So you have to look at the chart. You have to go by percentages and weights and percentages of your grains and calculate the diastatic power and use enough. That's one of the beauties of the liquid, high temp amylase and the liquid glucose. It kind of eliminates the worry for that. So we don't have to, we can just use what grains we want to for flavor now and not worry so much about diastatic power, right? So we can just worry about the grain bill for the grains and use the malts for the flavor of the malt. A lot of people like 2-row. It's especially beer makers will tell you it's night and day difference in the flavor of the beer with the 2-row and 6-row. 6-row is pretty much always been more of a distiller's type malt because of the higher, diastatic power that it brings. But when you deal with flavor, I'm not going to say everybody, but a good majority, most everybody would agree that the 2-row is got more flavor and better flavor than a 6-row. There's always going to be, those that don't think so. But for the most part, most people think that the 2-row has a little bit better flavor, but it's got lower diastatic. So you'd always have to use more of it. Well, now that we got the liquid, enzymes, we don't have to worry about that as much. We can just pretty much do malted grains for flavor and use our percentages for flavor. And we can take advantage of the endogenic enzymes in those, but we don't have to depend on them anymore. So we can, of course, cut back on the amount of liquid, that you're going to add. So if you've got, pretty close to the diastatic, or you're using, 10% of a 2-row, that's probably not going to be enough, right? So, maybe use half of the high temp alpha, and I'd probably go ahead and use my glucose at full strength just because it does so well at making changing limit dextrins into consumable sugars for the yeast. So but yeah, you don't have to worry about it as much, and you don't have to use malted. You can kind of experiment with unmalted barley and see what kind of flavor that brings. And you can, don't have to worry about, if you want to use some specialty malts that have been denatured, you don't have to worry about, adding regular, malted barley to that chocolate malt because you don't care about diastatic anymore. You're using it for flavor, and you can add the liquid. So a lot of benefits, to using that, the liquid amylase. It's definitely a game changer. Good deal. I can't believe they saying it was going to be on tonight. I don't know. I don't know where they got that idea. That's never been said by me or Clint. I don't know. May thy sports be with you. What's up, JJ? Good to see you, brother. What's going on, Cave Daddy? Good to see you, my friend. Nope, you're not late this time. I had to scroll back and look for the question. I saw Clinton asking. Does open fermentation give more flavor like when they make sour beer? Is there? I don't think there's a lot of difference. I think if it's open, you do tend to get some wild yeast, which may impart some unique flavors or different flavors. I would say most malt, houses or places or beer makers have enough of the yeast in the air and on everything in that place that you're not probably going to get a lot of wild yeast. It's just yeast that's growing wildly, but it's the same yeast that they use, right? So it's just all over everything. Once you open ferment like that, or even closed fermentation, the yeast is going to be all over a lot of things. In every damn moth, every distillery will have a room where they mash in and an area where they mash, and it's always, you can always, like Alan Bishop was talking about, and Bam Bam, both you can go in with a swab or white gloves and just rub your hand on a lot of the stuff inside a distillery and pick up the yeast that they use, right? So I don't think you're going to get a lot of different. You might get some less oxygenation, uh, less degradation. So it's I don't know, in a beer probably maybe because you're drinking that directly, but after it's been distilled, I don't think you're going to get that. It's I don't think that my palate probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Some people might be able to, but I don't think it's going to make a big difference at all. No, no. Generally, corn does about 80-90% of itself. If it's perfectly malted, it's just not enough to do itself, but enough to get you by, right? Instead of that 107.5 or something that you'd like to get, that 107.0 with just the malted, you're going to get a 105.5, 106.5 range, and that's fine. It's not that critical, but the biggest part is gelatinizing the malted corn, and not denaturing the alpha and the beta glucanase in it, because you're gonna have to really cook it for a long period of time at a lower temperature. See, it's the way gelatinization works: higher temperature, shorter time. And a lot of times it's when you gelatinize like that, you're not worried about denaturing it, and that's why we add the malted grains later, at a specific temperature, because we don't want to denature those enzymes that we're going to be using. But if you're using liquid, it's no longer as big of an issue, so you can add them pretty much anytime you want to, and it probably get better gelatinization from them, at the higher temperature range. But a lot of people don't do the 100% malted anymore corn because of the low gelatinization and the time, because it takes a long, long time, 10, 11, 12 hours, depending on the amount and the temperature, 145, 55, you can't go above that. And, it takes a long time to gelatinize at that temperature. And that's about the lower limits of the possibility of gelatinizing. So it's, most people just don't bring that headache on themselves anymore, But there is a little bit of difference in the malted corn flavor. It does make it a little bit smoother. So, I'm not saying there's not a reason for it. It's just a lot of work. Yeah, where's that rain malt at, man? I want a puddle or two of it. What's going on, Morgan? Good to see you, brother. Kenny Parker in the house. What's going on, my friend? Good to see you, brother. Yeah, and barely. If it's malted perfectly, it's still, it's going to be like 90 and change, if that. But most home malted, you're going to get probably 70 or 80% conversion of what you normally would. So yeah, I mean, you can do that and just add a little bit of high temp or something. But again, you can probably just use powder and do as well, because you're not going to be able to get over that 155, because then you start denaturing the endogenic enzyme, the alpha in that malted corn. So you can probably just throw in some powder amylase and just to help it along, and that worked too. Yep, I sure did, brother. I did that in 1983. Um, I'm sure there's other people that may have done it, but it just wasn't mainstream, and it definitely wasn't in the hobby. Nobody in the hobby had ever done it. None of the steel builders have ever dealt with bypasses and all that. And I was we were in, I guess, the moonshine group, North Georgia's group. That's where a lot of us originated from. It was a big group, and a lot of us kind of spun out of that group. And the question was asking there, a friend of mine that's also an admin in the DIY Shine and Steel building, um, asked about, if I ever got any smearing from using a thumper. And man, that's bright. That's another monitor next to me I was pulling info from. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, I got a lot of smearing. That's why I built a bypass for it. And they were like, bypass? So I drew a diagram, with the bypass, going bypassing the thumper, and explained how you use it. You just use the bypass until you get to the hearts, and you open it up, and that way, it doesn't, you're not running heads and four shots through your, infusions and through your tails, and kind of fouling them up with that bad acetone flavor and stuff, because it's hard to get rid of that once it's in there, right? So, well, after I shared that, man, next thing you know, North Georgia's got them, and every steel builder's putting them. And it came out about the same time the jar rigs were coming out, and it was perfect because you could use the bypass to bypass it, so you could change the jars. A lot of people think that's where the idea originated, and it wasn't, but it just happened to coincide about the same time field building came up with the jar rigs. And so it's like, wow, the next thing you know, it was really good for the jar rigs as well, because you could just bypass, not have to worry about the steam and changing the jars. And so that worked out really well. And then I guess maybe a few years later, Jerry on the Moonshiner show acted like he invented it. But we know that's that's all drama. It'd been around a long time. A lot of steel builders been putting them on there for a few years. But I'm sure somebody in the past has maybe have done the same thing. I'd never seen it. I did it in '83 when I was running keg steels. And it just helped a lot. It helped eliminate it. And the first time I used it, you could definitely tell a difference. I wasn't getting that smearing anymore. I called it blending. I didn't know the terminology smearing at the time. I called it blending. And I didn't know all the terminology. That. But yeah, it worked real well, and I used it for years and years. I figured somebody probably come up with it, but when I got into the online community and stuff, I never saw it and never really talked about it much. I didn't really engage and talk a lot. I was kind of paranoid about people seeing it. So I was a little younger and smarter, maybe. You don't give a fuck anymore. But yeah, it works real well. It works great for thumpers. Works excellent for jar rigs. And for infusion. And it works. It works perfectly for that. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, yeah. They got good enzymes too. I'm not sure where all the enzymes are made. I know North Georgia doesn't formulate them. I know Phil Billy doesn't formulate them. I know Prohibition doesn't formulate them. A lot of people, they sell them. They just buy them in bulk and rebottle and sell them. It's like a lot of people do. And but I'd say that there's only a few places really that actually make them. I don't know if Firm Solutions does. I know they have two different kinds that I've not seen elsewhere. So they may formulate their own because I know they have pretty extensive chemistry lab there and biological lab. So they do a lot of DNA work and stuff there. So yeah, Patrick Heiss, he's on the ball over there, man. He's a smart cookie. He knows. But when I do get up with him and talk to him, which I definitely want to do someday, I definitely want to pick his brain. I'd love to have him and Alan Bishop on at the same time and talk to him because Patrick's brilliant, man. He knows the science down to the atom. I mean, he's very. I mean, he could sit probably 10 minutes and talk about different yeast by their scientific name, right? I mean, they've got thousands of different strains, isolated and stored. They're like the seed bank of yeast over there, and they do a lot of work. And not only that, they've got probably definitely a top 10 bourbon distillery in the world too, along with it. So definitely, the man's got it going on. He's pretty sharp cookie. Old Patrick is for sure. What's going on, Jackson? As a beginner home distiller, any helpful tip anyone can share? Any help is much appreciated. Uh, the best tip I've got is you found a place to come ask your questions. So read and learn as much as you can. You can watch Barley and Hops. You can watch Fieldbillies videos. You can watch lots of videos and learn as much as you can doing that. And if you have any questions, that's what we're here for. And we'll break it down for you. We, join one of our groups in Facebook. We've got DIY Shine and Steel Building. Again, that's DIY Shine and Steel Building and the Moonshine Militia. If you join the militia, make sure that you come over. Add Santa sent you from the podcast, and we'll get you in there. In our file section, we've got a lot of recipes. We got some how-tos and got a lot of knowledgeable people in both groups that can help you with your questions there as well. Not sure about militia, but on the DIY Shine and Steel Building page, you can join it and ask questions kind of with a nickname, so you don't have to give your real name out, so you can kind of remain anonymous. I know a lot of people, we get thousands of viewers, but only so many people live and so many people ask questions. So a lot of people interested, but a lot of people are still kind of afraid to put themselves out there, right? So what we try to encourage is people to maybe create a YouTube with a different name, and you can come in here with a different name on YouTube that won't identify who you are. You can call it, whatever you want to call it. I'm not going to put any wild names out there, but you don't have to use your real name. So, and you can come in there anonymously and ask your questions that way. But yeah, just ask a lot of questions. That would be, my advice is just start brainstorming, think of everything that you want to know and start asking questions, and we can break it all down for you. The first question would be, what kind of steel should I get? What's the best beginner steel? What's a good hobby steel? What other equipment will I need? And what's the best place to get them? What's the best deal? Nobody wants to pay a lot and pay too much. So, that's some questions that a lot of beginners ask. And then, we can break down the recipes and how to, cook your corn and, leach your starches out of the corn and prepare them to be converted into sugars, and how to convert them into sugars and distill that way. That way you're not buying a bunch of expensive sugar. I looked at some today. It's like beet sugar still about 70 cents a pound, but cane sugar is over $1 a pound now, or close to $1 a pound. Getting pretty expensive. So and you can use that corn. Corn is a cheaper source of sugar than buying a bag of sugar. So you can get more sugar out of corn per dollar, much cheaper, if you're buying it at the right places, than you can buying a bag of sugar. And it's a lot smoother and better product. So you'll get more flavor, and it won't have as much bite. So it'll definitely be as good. And I did notice a couple of people just sent a request to join DIY. Let me see if I can jump in there real quick and get you in there. So, but in our file section there at the top of the page, you'll see I need to add more files. I definitely need to add more files. Let's see, team members. Just all right, Randy and Steven, I got you both. You're in here now. Good deal. But yeah, ask questions. And first question, and I want to make sure that this works, so I'm going to do it. I love my pictures, and I've got it stored a little differently in a different location, so I want to make sure that I'm able to pull up my pictures. Come on now. There we go. I got a little storage drive on here. I'm not putting all this on the SSD. It's a little bit overkill for. Here we go. Yeah, I like the new PC though. It's working out pretty well. So this is called a bever. We call it a football still because of the shape of the cap that's on there. It's a little different. The new ones have a little bit more slanted head than just that little bump in the middle there. So this is kind of an older one. But I think they come in like, if I'm not mistaken, 5, 10, 13, and 18 and a half gallon sizes. I recommend 10, 13, or 18 and a half. The 5 is fine, but most people that get the 5, they end up like, I wish I'd just gotten the 10 or the 15 or the 18 and a half or whatever. Because I do love the hobby, and really it was only like $30-$40 more to get the bigger ones. I know the 13 is like $20 less than the 18 and a half, right? So I definitely would recommend just going ahead and getting the bigger one. You don't have to fill it all the way up, right? Just fill it halfway or better and you'll be all right. In fact, you don't want to fill them all the way up because you'll get foaming, right? When you boil water, you get foaming. So, you can imagine what boiling beer is going to be like, right? It can get foamy. So leave yourself a little space. But the 18 and a half, you can run 15 quite comfortably. And, if you use 5-gallon fermenters, you can get a few of those going. You get the big, plastic jugs that they put on top of the water coolers, those 5-gallon water jugs. If you buy the water from it, that's great because that's good, clean water to mash in with. And but those use number 10 stopper. Number 10 stopper goes into the top of those perfectly, and you can put your little airlock on there, and you can make decent wine with it. A lot of fine winemakers will browbeat me over using plastic. Oh, you should use glass. And yeah, you should have if you can afford to pay $40 for a glass one. But these are, free with the water that you get. You have a little bit of deposit. And when they get dirty, instead of having to scrub it, I just return it and get a new one, right? So get a free new one. But yeah, just come ask your questions. Come here and ask your questions. But anyway, this is called a bever, 18 and a half. It's got a little cap on here that you can put some copper mesh in to help remove the sulfites, right? That's one of the benefits of the copper steels that you'll see a lot, but they're pretty expensive. For a beginner, I probably wouldn't, $104 for the deboss. Yeah, I got mine from deboss. They got good customer service. But $104 for that tower is awesome. And I'll show you guys that tower. And you can put it right on this still right here. You just get a 2.5 to 2 inch reducer. And let me put that up here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And what JJ's talking about is this right here. This is about 1.5 feet, 2 foot spool. Then you got a sight glass. Then you got a deflator into 2 elbows, and then you got a shotgun condenser and then a little drip spout. $104 is very, very cheap for these parts. I can tell you right now, this spool that you start out with that shows the copper, that's a cutaway. It doesn't actually have that hole in there. That's just a cutaway to show you that they packed copper in there. I put my copper in the sight glass, but wherever you want to put it, that's fine. If you're going to put it in the lift tube there, or the spool, I would recommend they make these O-rings, right? You've got gaskets that go in between with these tri-clamp fittings. This is all tri-clamp. This is a 2-inch. And so they come with these gaskets, right? They go in between these tri-clamp fittings, and they have one that's got a screen mesh in it. And you can get different size mesh. And in fact, what for this purpose, you could get a pretty large mesh, like an 1/8 inch square mesh, right? And it'll just keep your copper mesh from sliding down into your pot, as it percolates and bubbles up through there. You get some agitation, some steam, and you'll get some water and vapors and alcohol dancing around, sputtering on it, and which is a good thing, because that means it's kind of scrubbing it, right? But sometimes it'll loosen it up and it'll drop out of there if you don't put that little screen in the bottom. Or a lot of times you'll just get one that's got just one wired one across, and that works just fine too, right? But yeah, that's and you can get those. I guess JJ said on eBay under Dibosh for $104. Excellent deal. Appreciate you telling us about that, JJ. That's really cheap, because those parts, if you bought those parts individually, you're looking at 180, $200. That spool right there is probably 20 or 30. Sight glasses are $30, $29, 25 to 30. That deflator is probably $60. Elbows are like $14, and that condenser is probably another $60. So those add up. It adds up to a pretty expensive part. So it's hard to beat those. Philbilly has them, but I know he doesn't have them for 104. That's pretty cheap. But if you want to support a brother, it's hard though for people to compete with China like that. Yeah, it changes quick out here. Yeah, man. I mean, you can take it in so in depth with the science. You can keep it as simple as you want, or you can go down those rabbit holes of the science and get as complicated, and I mean as scientific and really difficult, if you look at it scientifically and try to identify everything and all the chemical reactions and everything, that are taking place on a scientific basis. It's quite a complex thing going on, right? So there's a lot of complex things that are happening during the distillation process, but during just the mashing process as well. A lot of chemical processes taking place. The yeast and how they form, and it's very similar to a lot of biology and physiology, because a lot of that stuff that's happening also happens within our bodies. We got digestive enzymes that are breaking down food for the starches, for the sugars, to feed our cells, to give us energy and muscle growth, and that's pretty much the same thing that's going on here. You got all these cells that are breaking down and giving up the sugar to help, like in the malting process, all the starches are being converted into sugars to help that seed produce that radical, that first little, root that comes out and goes down, and that first little shoot that comes up, the cotyledon. I'm going to butcher the name. So cotyledon, those first little leaves that come up and out. And so that's all this starch and conversion is just giving that energy to send that root down and to send the cotyledon. I don't know, so it can all of a sudden start getting energy from the sun instead of from the starches. So once that happens, then photosynthesis takes over and it starts getting its energy there. So it's amazing, how that works. So all that's going on in the fermentation process as well. You stop that, right? When you malting it, you stop that process because it's starting to convert that starch, and you got that alpha amylase released, right? It's bound up in that aileron layer. And once it gets wet and starts to malt, it starts releasing that alpha amylase to break down that starch, right? And give it more sugars. And then you got the beta glucanase breaking down. So it's breaking down these sugars, debranching them, making it so it can, use this energy. And that's, you want to stop that process right then when you can maximize that amount of alpha amylase that's still in there. Because the longer you let it go and the longer that root grows, the more starches are being consumed to create that root, to create the cotyledon leaves that are coming out. So you want to stop that process right after that little root starts coming out just a little bit, maybe a quarter inch, eighth to a quarter inch. So you stop that process and then whack that little radical. They call it a radical. It's very bitter. So you want to knock those off when you dry it. You don't want to dry it hot, right? You don't want to use hot temperature because you denature that alpha amylase in it. But it's amazing, the whole process. It's very amazing. So yeah, you can get as scientific and go down the rabbit hole, and but you can keep it simple, and make just as good. There's a lot of people that have no idea of anything that I just said and could care less, that can make some of the best lip smacking liquor that you've ever put to your mouth, right? So you don't have to know all this to make good liquor. That's the beauty of it, and a lot of people don't, and they don't really care. They want to make the liquor. They don't care what makes it work. They're not a bit interested. All they want is the end product, and they can experiment around, try different things. And, they're doing science, whether they realize it or not. They just, they just don't have the understanding of why things do what they do. And a lot of people, they don't really care. They get good results without knowing. And, if I can get good results without knowing, why am I going to spend all that time, learning it if I don't have to, and some people just don't have that drive to have to know everything. When I was a kid, that was me. I had to know what made everything tick. I took things apart. We couldn't bring any piece of electronic, telephone, or anything. I'd take it apart, see what made it work. And sometimes I got it put back together and it worked. Sometimes it didn't, And it's so bad, my dad would start bringing stuff home that's broken, see if I could just fix it. So yeah, it'd keep me out of the stuff that did work that I'd take apart. Yeah, that's a good point. Patience and this is the best hobby in the world for procrastinators, because when you're making wine, you can just sit back and watch it ferment, right? Rack it off and sit back, and it's like, yeah, maybe I'll rack it off today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. We'll get around to it when we can, and it won't hurt anything, right? So it's a good hobby and a rewarding one if you like wines and beer and liquors of all different kinds. And two, another question you ask yourself when you get started is, what do you like to drink? So of course you're going to, start out with making something that you like to consume and that your friends like. So, what's going on, Wayne? Good to see you. I'm just 35 minutes. Oh my God. I'm talking too much. But good question to be to ask yourself, what do you like to drink? What do you want to make? What are your goals? And a lot of the equipment and stuff that you buy will be based on that. So let me move along here. Yeah, it was a great show. I hope they do a lot more shows like it. I like them both. They're both good people. It's a good show. Both of them very knowledgeable. What's going on? Mike checked 100%. Awesome, brother. Appreciate you. Good to see you. I'm a little bit late. I'm trying though. I'm just scrolling down. So hey, there ain't nothing wrong with thin mash, man. I made thin mash for 30 years. I still, from time to time, will make thin mash. So ain't nothing wrong with that. If I don't have enzymes and I don't have the time to gelatinize and do all that, and it's cold, and I just want to run some corn liquor, then yeah, hell yeah, get me some cornmeal or some cracked corn and sugar. I'm going to town. I ain't going to fool around. And every once in a while, even the old distillers, every once in a while we'll make us some sugar shine. We ain't got time for other stuff. Don't have corn. Don't want to go to Tractor Supply and get corn or Buc-ee's. And so I'm just going to I got that 20-pound bag of sugar. I'm just gonna run me some sugar shine. No problem, brother. Hey, you don't have to apologize for any questions that you ask here, man, because that's what we're here for. You ask all the questions that you want. I'll eventually get to them. Clint beats me to most of them because I'm way behind always, but he'll give you the short answer. I'll give you the long answer. And between the two, you should definitely. And if you don't understand what we're talking about or saying, ask. Don't be afraid to ask. So that's what we're here for, guys. What's going on, Jason? Good to see you, brother. I'm way behind. I apologize. What's up, Patty? In the house? Distilled the failed all grain yesterday. Actually came out pretty damn good. That's awesome, brother. I knew it'd come out okay. It doesn't always work the best, but as long as you can make a little bit of liquor and get something out of it, first time, if it come out pretty good, you're doing damn good than I did. If it came out pretty damn good, then you did a lot better than me. My first probably 4 or 5 times at least, I scorched the shit out of it. I'd never done a lot of cooking. I never cooked corn and the sugar, and all that. We get scorched and burnt and we were doing it over a fire with a pressure cooker. So it was a challenge, I'm not gonna mention how old I was when I did it. I was pretty young. And so the first, half a dozen times probably got scorched, from the fire. We finally figured out how to regulate the heat from the fire and wait till it got cold before we started cooking. And yeah, it was a learning process. I learned from lots of failures. That's one of the best teachers too. But that's awesome, brother, that it came out good. But we'll do our best. I think temperature that you cooked it might have been an issue. I think you said 160, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll get that temp up. I will mention in the militia, been some talk about using fish tank heaters and stuff to keep your mash warm. Every winter we talk about these things. And there's been talk about some barrel bands, right? And they make these bands that a lot of people that make diesel, a lot of honey makers, a lot of people in different industries use these barrel bands to keep the product warm, oil, whatever, is in it. So these things will heat up anywhere from like 65 degrees to 300 and some degrees. So they get quite hot. Fahrenheit. And the question rose that can you distill with one? Yes, you technically could distill with one on a metal. Right? I wouldn't try it with any plastic for sure. No. But on a metal barrel, yeah, you could probably distill with one. But because the way they fluctuate on and off with the heat, probably not gonna. You're probably gonna get some smearing, and it's not gonna be ideal. It's gonna be like cooking on a stove that cycles on and off. You're gonna get pretty much the same result. We talk about that every week because that's something people need to know about. If you're going to try to do the stovetop cooking, make sure that your stove doesn't cycle on and off. Some do, some don't. But I'm not talking about I'm talking about more the infrared type, not the induction. I'm not talking about those. Those are a different bird, a different color. But just the smooth top stove versus the coil. I think most of the coils do cycle on and off. The smooth top I've got doesn't. Once it gets up to 8, it pretty much stays on at high. For 8 to 9, it stays on solid. I can boil water till it's dry, and it never cycles on and off. So it works great. For other people, the stove won't. If you have a gas stove, that's awesome, right? So you can keep that constant temperature and adjust it as need be. So that works fine. But if you have a big 18.5 gallon steel, it's going to be pretty tough to cook on a gas burner stove. I guess you could probably use the front and back burners, but you're going to have to maybe put a little spacer there in the middle to keep it from tilting sideways on you. But you could put them on a turkey fryer, and use your burner there and do it that way, or you can have them weld some elements in it using a beer keg is another great beginner's keg we talk about. But I'm glad it came out pretty good for you, brother. but it'll only get better from there, man. So that's awesome. I'm glad it worked out well. So I'm gonna try to catch up. Yeah, back in the old days, they didn't get good conversions at all. 1040 with malted corn and the slow gelatinization cooking and all that. 1040, 105. That was it. That's all they got, unless they used malted grains. But they understood. They didn't know all about the endogenic enzymes that are in the grains themselves, but they knew for some reason when they malted it, they got more alcohol and better flavor. And they're like, I don't know what's happening, but when I use that malted grain versus the regular grain, I get a lot more alcohol and it's a little bit of tasting. So, they just, they learned over time, just trial and error. Well, this works better, man. I like that malt, man. It has good flavor, and man, we got a lot more alcohol out of it this time, and so, that was the origins of it. They knew to use it before they knew why they were using it. It's amazing. But anyway, getting back to the barrel bands, so a lot of people are using it for their fermentations, and yeah, you can use those bands on your plastic fermenters. Just be careful and watch the temps, because those things are generally set for, and geared for high temps, right? So yeah, make sure that when you're adjusting them, start at the very lowest setting and sneak up to the temperatures that you need. Don't start in the middle, because it'll melt that barrel if it's plastic. But it's also good for steeping, right? O'Shane asked a question in Militia, and we were talking about it. And I wanted to mention that, it's good for holding temperatures. So if you've got that gelatinization going on and you've got that boiling water poured in there, and you just want to hold a high temp, but you don't want to necessarily, boil it or get it hot enough you're just trying to maintain the temperature. Add one of those bands to your fermenter will help keep that temp up. Again, be very careful about going over temp. Actually, they probably make some of these that are for plastic barrels, but for the most part, most of them are designed to be used whatever you want to use it for. But if you're using it for plastic, don't crank it up, or you will have a puddle full of plastic. Yeah, Philbilly did the Bear Grylls thing. Of course, he didn't drink his own pee; he distilled it. But yeah, you can distill it. You just get water, but you're definitely gonna want to double and triple distill that, right? What's going on, Chris? Good to see you, brother. Yeah, I'm having to look a little closer. This monitor's got it's 1440, so everything's a little bit smaller. You might see me put my glass on. Hell, actually, the text on the screens are bigger than my comments over here. I have to see if I can adjust that. What's going on here, Billy? Good to see you, brother. All right, hurry back, brother. As a beginner, I started making mead. Okay, to get the fermentation process down. Awesome. Wine, another good way. Once you learn to make wine, you make some better brandies. Because that's the origin of wine, or brandy is from a fruit wine that we call a must instead of a mash. We call a must. So yeah, that's a good way to learn. A lot of people that are into the grains learn from beer making, right? They learn how to manipulate the grains and get the starches from the grains and the proteins and all this. And these beer makers, they there's a lot more to the process of making a good beer versus just cooking some grains and making liquor with them, right? So because you're drinking the mash, so you're making a product that you're actually drinking instead of something you're just going to distill the alcohol from. And the same thing with wine making and brandy making. You're drinking the actual mast or mush. Um, so you have to, take extra steps and care to make it the best flavor and the best that you can, because that's the final product. So once you learn beer making and wine making, mead making, it'll definitely, distilling it is simple. As long as you can maintain the temperature and not scorch things and follow a few standard, safety guidelines, distilling it's not going to be an issue. It's actually, getting that good product that has good flavor. So if you can make good beer or good wine, yeah, you're definitely going to translate that into some good whiskey and brandies and other distillates. And I'm just now getting to that. So Lord, I'm way behind. 20 minutes. That's not too bad. Yeah, it's a great price. Uh, I just use a stove, man. I mean, hot plates are going to cycle on and off too. Um, there might be some induction plates that people use. That's going to be hit or miss on your stainless steel, because I know most of these steels are 304 series stainless, and that's not got a lot of iron in it, or it's not going to really work real well for a um, induction heater. So not enough carbon steel in there for it. The 400 series, a lot of your 400 series will, but most of your steels don't. So some people, put plates. You could get ball bearings and put in the bottom of your, mash tun if you want to. Get some, high carbon steel ball bearings. It's fine. Just get all the oil and grease off of them, right? Clean them up real well. But I mean, that metal is not going to hurt you, right? We cook out of, steel pans all the time and cast iron. So, um, yeah, you can do that. Get you some ball bearings. A lot of those are higher carbon steel, 400 series plus if they're stainless. But yeah, or just use a stove or a turkey fryer, or use induction, or use elements. Right, a lot of people are putting ferrules on the side of their tanks and going in with the stainless steel elements and using electric that way. It's there's a lot of options out there these days. But yeah, a lot of the hot plates will cycle on and off, and thermostatically kick on and off. So it's kind of going to be hit and miss on those as well. Um, might be a way to get into them and circumvent that, but you're going to avoid any kind of warranty. But there may be a way where you could wire them directly to the rheostat where it just sends straight power like an SCR would, instead of a thermostatically controlled thing, more like a PID would. So um, probably have to talk to people that use those hot plates. I've not used hot plates. I know a lot of people that do and use the induction, and they have some success with it. Okay, one of my bottles of glucoamylase has turned a little cloudy, and this has been stored in the fridge. Good, still viable. How old is it? Just by chance. Yeah, I mean, it should last you a couple of years. Just have to use a little bit more of it, right? It starts losing efficacy over a year. Definitely, if it's kept out of the refrigerator, you're not going to get much more than a year out of it. But if you keep it refrigerated, you get a few years out of it. But again, as time passes, you're just going to have to use a little bit more and more and more to get the job done. Now, have you all tried this Dr. Pepper Zero Blackberry Zero Sugar? If you like Dr. Pepper, it's pretty good. But man, that's good stuff. I like it. It I wish there was an answer for that, but I hate this answer because it sounds like a smart aleck answer until it's done, because it'll vary. There's so many variables like temperature, the viability of the yeast, the type of yeast that you used, how much sugar is in there. If it's high sugar, is what's the pH? Is there acidity getting to the point where it's going to cause issues and cause crashes and stuck fermentations? There's so many variables. So that's why we try to eliminate all these variables, right? We try to keep it at a certain temperature. We throw the oyster shells in there to keep it buffered so the pH doesn't crash, because the more sugar that you use and the more sugar intensive the recipes are, the more likely they are to have a pH crash. So that's something that we watch out for. Yeah, it's the zero. I mean, my fiance is diabetic, so we don't get a lot of sugary stuff. So I don't need it either because I'm big. So we do a lot of the zero stuff. And I tell you, after drinking these zero drinks and drinking a regular pop, it's like, man, I'm drinking syrup. Like turn up a bottle of Cairo or something. It's just so sweet. It's crazy. Or should I just test the mash every day until it where I want it to be? Now we have a hydrometer. We call it a triple scale hydrometer. I'm sure you may be aware, and if not, we have a hydrometer that we use. It's kind of like a battery testing hydrometer, right? We have one that we use in our mashes and our beers and our wines, called a triple scale. And then we have a proofing hydrometer that measures the proof of alcohol, right? So that's for when we get done distilling, we'll use that to figure out how much water we need to add to get it to the right proof. Once you get sugars involved, though, that proofing hydrometer doesn't want to work well anymore, and then you need a refractometer for that. But yeah, just let it do its thing. Generally, if all your variables are good on a grain, and you're keeping all your variables pretty tight and everything's done perfectly, 3 to 5 days. That just doesn't hold true for most hobbyists in the wintertime because the temperature's lower. We don't have that crazy viable yeast that they have in the distilleries. So it tends to take a little longer. We use different yeasts that, wine yeast a lot of times, that EC1118, that's a champagne yeast. It likes a little cooler temperatures and a little longer fermentation times. So there's a lot of variables, that's going to come into play. So you just, there's no real right answer for that. I will say that during the summertime when temperature is not an issue and the days are 90 and the nights are 70 and you got about an 80 average in between, that's perfect for a daty yeast or a bread yeast or a distiller's yeast, which tend to like a little warmer temperatures. Great for tequila yeast. The warmer the better for them up to a certain point. The blue yeast for the tequilas. So we don't have any issues. Everybody's like, yeah, it's been on 3 days and it's done already, and then comes November, December, and it's like, I think I got a problem. It's not ready yet. It's been 3 days. It's like, it's going to take longer because it's just cold. And the yeast, when it gets cold, they just get lazy, man. They don't want to get out there and do the work. They slow down. When it gets to a certain temperature, they'll just go into hibernation. It's like a big old bear. So, yeah, and I don't think you can really use too much on this. I mean, I guess you could dump the whole bottle in there, affect flavor, and get crazy. But just use twice as much as normal for a 2-year-old bottle. I've increased. I've got some that's getting a little bit of age on it, and I've used more than I need, more than it calls for. I also have some old powder that I throw in that I'm too ornery and stupid and tight to just throw away. And two, when you buy it, when you get it, if it doesn't have a date on it, pencil in what date you bought it and stuff. Just like stuff you freeze, just write it on the outside. 18 and a half gallon beaver is awesome. And it's not just for beginners. You know, I know people that's had them for years. I've got one, and it's my inside wintertime distiller, and it's awesome. You know, you get a pretty good yield out of it. Right now, I think they're still only like 220 some dollars. You know, for that size pot. You know, you boil your water in it because a lot of people don't have a pot that big, right? And so you can boil your water in it and use that to help gelatinize your corn. You can ferment in it. Just make sure that you rinse it and clean it out real good after you ferment. You don't want any of that yeast shit bed in the bottom. You don't want any of that staying in the bottom or it'll scorch. But clean it up real good. Yeah, you can use it for everything. And they're very handy. You know, probably the best beginners still ever. And a lot, that's why I say the 18 and a half. If you get the 15 or the 18 and a half, people tend to use them for a lot longer, you know, before they graduate to something else. And some people just, they're perfectly content with that because you know, it gives them to a few gallons, right, of liquor. So they're like, yeah, this is all I need. You know, I run it. But when you get that 5 gallon still and you're only getting that quart off of it, if you're lucky, you know, that's when it's, you know, you get a quart or two. It's like, you know, it's a lot of work for such a little amount. You know, I'm gonna have to distill at least twice a week just to keep up with my drinking. Right? So get a little bit bigger. You know, it helps, and it's not a lot more work to do to ferment. You know, 15 gallons or 20 gallons versus 5 gallons. You know, it just takes a little bit longer to heat your water and a little bit longer to grind your corn up, but that's it. And you don't have to get, you know, if you do little batches, you got to get that grinder out, you got to get the pot out, you got to get the turkey fryer out every time, and a lot of work and prep. But if you do more, you only have that prep. All that prep time that's the time that really that's the longest part because most of it's just waiting on the water to boil. You know, so that's like sitting around watching the grass grow. You know, it just sit around and wait, right? A lot of work in that, but it isn't easy. There is a lot of work in it. I'll try to make it sound a lot easier than it is. There is a lot of work to it. That's why everybody doesn't do it. But yeah, if you have an airlock, you'll notice that the bubbling will start slowing down. You get less carbon dioxide. But as temperatures cool down, the same thing happens. So it's hard just to go by that because you think, well, it must be ready. And taste, you can taste it, you know, and see, is it sweet anymore? Taste it when you first make it. It's just corn and sugar, right? And grains. This is stuff you eat, right? And you've cooked it. So I mean, if you'd eat corn pudding, why wouldn't you taste your corn? You know, it's just corn. People are afraid they think it's animal grade, it's animal corn. You know, I bought it at the feed store. It's corn. It's the same thing. You could grind it up and make your cornmeal, and a lot of people do. You know, it's the same thing, and it's not dirty corn. You know, it's kept to the same standards. So if you're getting it from a good quality place, you know, and you know you can rinse it, and actually probably should. You know, Sean Peterman talking about the very knowledgeable guy in grains. You know. Talking about the propionic acid that they, you know, spray on the kernels and stuff to keep them fresh and yellow and looking nice. And so, you know, if you want to kind of rinse that off, that'd be good. But you know, you're not going to get a lot of dirt and garbage and stuff in your corn kernel. Now, if you buy cracked, you're going to probably get some cob and a little bit of leaf and everything else and a little bit in there because it's a lot harder to tell. Because of its consistency. But if you just buy whole kernels and buy your own grinder, which I do recommend highly, it's like coffee. You know, you can buy coffee that's already been ground that gets stale over time, or you can buy, you know, coffee beans and grind them yourself, and you know how much fresher and better that is. Well, the same translates to your liquor. You get fresh corn and grind it yourself, it's definitely going to give you more corn and better flavor than just a crack that's been sitting in a bag for and oxidizing for months, right? So, Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what I was talking about, the elements. You can get a 2-inch ferrule mounted to the side of your keg, or these vevers. You take it to somebody that welds, or if you got a welder, you can weld. Yeah, you can TIG it right on there. Little stainless 2-inch ferrule, and they make stainless steel. I'm getting messages. They make stainless steel elements that go right into that. Try clamp in and run it to your 220, your 110, whatever the wattage is that you want to use. You get your PID. A lot of people, make you a box if you don't know much about wiring, and you can have somebody make you one if you know a little bit about wiring. If you don't, I recommend you get somebody to do it, because that's 220, 240 volt. That's high amps, high amperage. You're dealing with stuff that can kill you, so you got to be very careful. If you don't know what you're doing, then at least consult with somebody who does, or have them do it for you. You can buy them. There are a lot of people that make them. 16% moisture or less is what you want. Anything over 16, and you can start getting molds. I notice I'm starting to see some of these questions down here. All right, let me go on. Yeah. You're lucky on that peninsula down there. Awesome. Good deal. That'll be a perfect size too, for a decent steel. A lot of people use 5-gallon buckets and half-inch, but if you can get that 5/8 and a big 15-gallon, it'd be nice. And it'll accommodate a larger steel. You can grow into it and use the same worm. I do recommend just doing the tri clamp going into it. That way, it makes it very modular when you start using those. Don Brooks. I almost have to scroll on. Let's see. Got some good questions. Don, what would I put in a thumper when doing a run? If you're doing brandies and stuff, you can put fresh puree, fruit puree in there, and a lot of, purees mixed with sugars and sweeteners to make it awesomely sweet and flavorful. If you're doing grain runs, you can put your tails in there from your last run, or you can use one of my secrets. If you're doing corn liquor, get you some big cans, those big cans of cream corn. And if you got an immersion blender, you can use that, or you just use your regular house blender, right? Blend all that corn up. You don't want little kernels in it, but blend it all up real good and put that in there. Man, it'll give you some really good corn flavor for your corn liquor. It'd be the best corn liquor you ever drank. Guaranteed, you'll love it. But yeah, a lot of, I used to put tails. I save tails, and I put tails in there to so I could increase the volume of alcohol, because there's a lot of ethanol left in those tails that's easily separated from it in subsequent distillation. So yeah, and you don't want to fill it all the way up, right? We're just talking about a little bit of, and you can step it. If you got a drain on it, you can add some tails to it and run it for a while and drain the water out of the bottom. And you can infuse the same way. If you infuse, you can drain it out after a while, after it, kind of thins out, and keep adding more. And you can do the same with your tails. You can keep adding tails to it. And if you're doing that, it's good, especially on stripping runs, to kind of strip all of it out. And then on your subsequent runs, you can do your spirit runs, right? Yeah. When you have a larger reservoir, you'll tend to require less flow, and it'll be more consistent because you have more volume, and it takes more heat to change it, right? So you'll see less radical changes, but you'll still need to refresh it, but it just won't have to be pumped in at a high rate. And then there's actually some that just aren't, like the Vever 3 pots. Don't get them. If you got them, definitely going to have to make a better condenser, because they're not. It's totally insufficient. What's going on, Jason? He sent a want to up my game in terms of taste. Ran Uncle Jesse's sour mash enough, but want more flavor. Good. Something normal people like. Should I explore Jolly Rancher infusion? Well, I mean that's a start. But if we're talking about just corn and grains, I would talk. Make sure that you're doing some of the conversions and less sugar because I know with the USJJM you're using a lot of sugar and you're making basically a thin mash and and you're not doing as much conversions if you're doing it the USJJM method. If you're doing it the old school method, then you're doing conversions each time. You're just using back set to make the sour mash. So there are different ways to make it. But the Uncle Jesse's, definitely we talk about every run, take 10% out or 15% out and cook that on your stove and add of your grain. So take 10 or 15% of the corn out, cook 10 or 15% of that corn, convert it, gelatinize it. It's easy to do on the stove, right? So it's it's in a smaller pot. You're not doing mega gallons. You're just doing 10% of what you normally would. So it's much easier to do. Convert, add that, and do that each time, and you will maintain a better flavor. But if it does kind of wear out over time, and it is using a lot of sugar, so if you want a smoother liquor, I highly recommend doing just corn with some malts, malted barley, a good 2-row, using your high temp in your liquid glucose as well, and again using that cream corn in your thumper will definitely up that flavor profile for you and make you some of the best corn liquor that you want. Now, if you're doing the Jolly Rancher thing, I highly recommend going with the column that we showed earlier, the debauch column. If you weren't on, let me pump that up there. So you can get higher proof. And what happens is, so you'll get higher proof and you won't taste as much of the corn flavor anymore. And the corn doesn't necessarily pair well with a watermelon Jolly Rancher or a what's the green apple, Jolly Rancher. They just don't pair well, having that corn flavor and kind of, clashes with it, I guess you could say. It's just not, doesn't complement each other well, in my opinion. Now, everybody, it's an opinion thing. But you can use this and you can use reflux to up your proof and take a lot of that flavor out. So we're not using cream corn anywhere, that's out the door, but we're making a more neutral spirit, right? And then you can either infuse or you can just throw Jolly Ranchers in the jar once you're done, and proof it down, get it to, 100 proof or whatever you want, and throw, 10 or 15 Jolly Ranchers in that quart and just let them, dissolve and run it through. After they dissolve out, you'll have a few floaties or something in there. Just run it through a coffee filter and get the floaties out if you want. It's just candy, something you normally eat anyway. It's not going to kill you. But to some people, it's not aesthetically pleasing, and it's a pride thing. You don't want to hand somebody a jar with a lot of floaties in it, like, ew, what's that? So run it through a coffee filter. But yeah, it makes good flavorful shine. Or you can there's lots of flavors, Turani, for example, and Monin and Olive Nation. There's a lot of different flavors that you can buy that bartenders use, right? Grenadine is another flavor. And you can get concentrated fruit juices, right? Get the frozen concentrate and mix that without any water. Just put the concentrate in with the liquor and stir it in, and it's concentrated flavor, and it tastes great, right? So experiment a little bit, become a bartender, a barista, because you've done the distilling thing. Now you got to take it to the next level and turn that vodka or that pure grain or the white dog, or you can make whiskey. You can age it on a barrel, and make it taste more like a whiskey or a bourbon. There's so many things that you can do that just other than just drinking it right off the tap, right? So yeah, no rules, just let your imagination take you away and do whatever you want to do, right? Welcome, brother. What is the best ratio for a column, 15-1 or 20-1? And does the cap height count towards that ratio? Now, I'm not sure what we're talking about as far as height. Um, yeah, I'm not real following you, but the taller your column is, um, the more reflux you're going to get naturally, because it only cools as it goes up, because it's not exposed to as much heat up here as it is down here. So it's cooling the whole time these vapors are rising. It hits that deflegmator, boom, it shocks, and that deflegmator knocks down a lot of water and alcohol, right? And it only lets the more volatile through. So that's why you get a higher proof. A lot of your water is knocked down, right? Because your water is one of the first things that condense, because it has a lower boiling point. Um, or a higher boiling point. The lower boiling point stuff goes on through. So um, you're taking a lot of water out with that reflux. So the more reflux that you get, now, as far as steel size, yeah, you don't want 100-gallon steel running on a 2-inch, a 2-inch column like this, right? So there are some ratios for vapor velocity and things of that nature that you're gonna, want to step it up. So maybe a 4 or 6-inch column, for 100-gallon steel would be more, a much better way to go about it, right? And height wise would probably have to increase as well, but you can increase the diameter and not have to increase the height, and increase the size of that deflegmator or deflameter to get your, reflux. But there are so many different types of steels and hybrids. If you're just talking about simple pot steel, you know, this is, for a hobbyist, this is definitely going to be the way. For a keg or 18 and a half gallon bever, this is perfectly adequate. But if you're stepping it up to, 55 gallon, you might want a 4-inch. That's a good upgrade. Yeah, it's definitely the way to go. I mean, I will say, the canister filters that are on here, it's called a canister condenser. I'm sorry, filter, canister condenser. And inside that, it's just got like a wound up corrugated stainless. Mine had some negative sloping, so I was getting spurting coming out of it. So I wasn't real happy with it, and I was getting a little bit of smearing from it. So I wasn't real happy with it. So I now I bought I bought a couple of these because I got them so cheap. I think it's $120 when I got mine from D-Bosch, and it was on a sale. But these shotgun condensers work quite well, and not as good as a copper worm though. I'm not gonna even kid you about that. But it's a decent one for this size. For the size 18 and a half gallon, it's perfectly adequate. I did drill and tap the inlets for these and increased them slightly, because the Chinese thread pattern just doesn't always want to work with American parts, right? And that's one of my biggest issues with a lot of the Chinese stuff, is that their threads, they're so random, man. It takes a lot of Teflon tape on those fittings a lot of times. So I bought tap and die and tapped them out, and bought some American stainless fittings. And one thing, if you notice, when these come straight out, I put elbows there, right? So if you're looking at this at the top, look at the deflameter on the left side, the long one that says 400 millimeter. That's your not your deflameter, but I mean your condenser. You see how this blue tubing, water tube, comes up and curves and goes into that fitting? Over time, right where that bend is, it'll crimp on you, and it reduces the flow drastically. So I took those fittings out and I put elbows in. That way it's coming straight up, and gravity doesn't cause that bend anymore. And you don't have to worry about that bend and restricted flow, because I wanted to increase the flow of mine, and I was definitely able to do that. And I put those elbows on, and it helped tremendously. And I've got elbows on my deflameter and elbows on my condenser. And yeah, you don't have to worry about that pipe bending and pinching off. After a while, it gets warm from the warm water. And I don't care what hose you get, unless you get that good solid reinforced stuff, it's always going to crimp and start cutting off, and it gets flat. and it restricts your flow big time. So if you get those elbows and put on there, definitely the way to go. The tip for most Santas, but it definitely increases your flow and helps a lot. And also, these right here, these aren't too bad, but when I did increase it, I got rid of the piping as well. I don't use the pipes that came with it. I got larger hose, and I've got brass fittings, and I can adjust the flow into each. And when I do that, um, it enables me to increase or decrease the flow into uh, my condensers or my deflator, especially my deflator. My condenser, I pretty much go with a constant, on that, but I can adjust it if I want to. But the deflator is something that you definitely want to be able to control, so you can control if you have bubble plates where exactly that the liquid's going to be in a flux, and what do they call it? Where's man? My science. I'm losing my science, but it's anyway. It's a happy median, I guess you could say, equilibrium. So it's kind of you can increase your coldness and it'll drop it down. You'll get more reflux and it'll drop down on your column, or you can increase the temperature and that water will raise. So you want to kind of keep it in the middle. So you can adjust that for that purpose, and you can adjust your proof that way as well. More reflux, higher proof. Appreciate it, Tanny. What variables in the whole process influence the flavor outcome of the final product? Thanks for your knowledge. Appreciate you, brother. I guess some of the most important variables is in the mashing process and not actually the distillation process. There, of course, the higher temperature, the faster you run, the more water that you tend to get. And if you're not using reflux, so you get more water, so your proof will be lower and your flavor profile will be different. There is a point where you can get too much and kind of muddy the flavor. Alan talked about that. So there's a balance, and it's this experience, and each different distillate will be handled differently and need to be handled differently. So it's a trial and error and a learn as you go kind of thing, and you'll figure that out. But I would say probably for flavors in the mashing process, making sure your yeast doesn't get stressed, or once you get to a certain level, stressing your yeast in certain ways to get a certain flavor is definitely something that can influence the flavor. Also, the recipe going into it. If you make a brandy with a fraction of the fruit needed and a lot of sugar, don't expect as good a flavor as one that has mostly sugars coming from the fruit itself, right? Same with wine. So, there's a happy balance there to where it becomes a little bit too cost prohibitive to use just fruit and get all fruit like a true brandy, because fruit's expensive. So, we'll use concentrated fruit juices. We'll use sugar and other things and cheat a little bit and use less fruit. And when you do sacrifice a little bit, but the more that you do sacrifice, the more it will impact your flavor. So I would say probably in the mashing process, it have a lot to do with your flavor. Basically, the distilling, most people distill, very similarly in the industry. So, and age in the same barrels, pretty much. It's the same char levels. So the 10 to 20 to 30% of influence that you can add, we know 60 to 80% of the flavor tends to come from the barrels themselves and from the aging process in those barrels. So, the 10 to 40% or 20 to 40% of flavor that you put into that barrel will make it unique, right? So, but that's just on a barrel aged liquor. Now, running vodkas differently, proof differently, what grain is it from? There's so many different factors, potato versus wheat versus corn, it just varies, and it begins a lot of times of beginning opinion things, where it's just not a factual thing anymore. It's just based on opinion, and everybody has different opinions on things, or there'd just be a few jars in the liquor store if everybody agreed, right? So I would say the biggest variables would be in the mashing process, the proper cooking process, how you get the sugars naturally from the grain, versus using a lot of sugars. So that'll add to your flavor. But during the distillation process, things that impact the flavor can be, like I was talking about, how fast you distill, how much water come off, the proof you're coming off, whether you're infusing or not. There's so many things that you can do that will impact that. So um, it's a lot. It does. So when you're boiling water at high, you just kicks on off. So my old one, I've got an old Frigidaire, and it's a decent one. It's actually better than the one I've got up there now, which I may swap them back out. But both of them, I've got a newer Frigidaire, stainless, but it doesn't have the middle burner, and it doesn't have the what do they call it when the induction. Uh, what's that from the fan in the stove? In the oven part, there's a fan in there. What do they call that? Man's not listening. Anyway, it's got a fan inside the stove oven part, so it heats up more evenly and better. And all these people that cook breads and stuff, so that's better. But anyway, neither one of them do. Both of them, when I get to 8, they stay constantly on. Well, my one new one doesn't because, it's not new, but when I got off my sister after she passed away, but it's it's got a broken element now, so I'm gonna have to do some work on it. Yeah, big old spoon. That's good, man. Shit, I'm so far behind. I'm just going to scroll through here. No, I think it's the 400 series. Let me double check. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure I did the research on it. Okay, what's this? 400 series stainless steel, particularly 430 and 432, performs best with induction heating because it's more magnetic and ferric. It's got more carbon content, so it's more ferric. So your 400, especially 430 and 432, which I didn't know those specific numbers, but yeah, you want to use the 400. And multi-ply clad stainless, high quality cookware, 3-ply or 5-ply usually has a conductive aluminum or copper core sandwiched between the stainless steel outer layer being magnetic. So they kind of mix the copper for the even heat distribution with some of the uh, higher series. This says here 1810 with magnetic base. So some of these pans also have maybe a laminate 400 series on the base and a 300 series on the top. So, or they may work and bond them in together. Where I have a iron plate bonded to the bottom. That's that you can get like a thin, you know, cast iron, or you could probably take a cast iron, but it's going to be very inefficient if you have that barrier in between it. So it's going to have to really get hot, hot, hot. But you could do that. But yeah, the 400 series is what you want. The 430, 32. I didn't know what numbers though. Corn and cinnamon. If you do the cinnamon, make sure that you add that to your mash after it's completed or into the actual fermenter when you're getting ready to do it. if you want to put it in a thumper, you can. Be careful; it's very strong, but it can stress yeast. Cinnamon and a few other spices are kind of antimicrobial. A lot of people found out, and cinnamon's one of them. So it cinnamon and yeast they're not happy together. It's like sodiums and stuff, So um, let's try to keep the salt out and the cinnamon. But if you put that cinnamon in the thumper, and don't worry about my head shaking. I haven't had any strokes or anything, but I do have hyperactive leg syndrome, so I bounce my legs a lot. But yeah, like if you want to make something like a fireball, yeah, and start very very light with the cinnamon because it can get very overpowering if you use a bunch in your thumper, especially small thumper and infuser. Yeah, be careful because it can get overwhelming. Up Shadow, good to see you, brother. I took care of that problem, brother. I'm sorry about that. My apologies, but you take care of, bro. I saw that and I'm like, what? We got you, brother. Yeah, well, a lot of people laugh, but there's a lot of cereal grains is what we use to make a lot of mashes with, and there's a lot of malts that are in our cereal. So I've made some pretty good liquor with Raisin Bran is a great thing to put in. It'll help give nutrients. So any sugar washes or something like that, or rums and things that you don't get a lot of nutrients, if you don't have other regular nutrients or dead yeast to use, you can always add some bran flakes, crush them up real good. That's a good nutrient. And I just now getting the shots, and it's 9:30, and I'm at 9 o'clock. So I'm 30 minutes behind, folks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That's why Clint and I work well together. He can answer it. That way people can get that quick answer, and then for the people that aren't watching or can't read the type, because a lot of people are on one platform or another, so they'll have to listen to me give the answer. Yeah, it does. It comes through. Cinnamon comes through very strong. So definitely, don't use a lot of sticks. I mean, it's your first time, you'll probably use too much if you don't hear this. So once you hear this, it's like your first banana mash. You learn certain things the hard way, and if you don't hear it from somebody, your first banana mash is going to end up on the floor because those things have a massive cap on them. They'll get huge. So, leave at least 40%, 30% room where it's going to be on the floor, man. I'm telling you, it's crazy. You never dream of something having that big of a cap on your ferments, but they do. They're massive. No problem, brother. Appreciate you, man. And again, man, get on here and ask you questions. I know a lot of people get a lot of their questions answered, asked on here, and they get them answered. So, uh, but I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you being on here with us. Yeah, and again, I wouldn't use it for my ferment. Just if you want to add it to the distillate when you get ready to distill it, absolutely, you can throw it in there and or put some sticks in your thumper, or maybe a stick in your thumper, or an infuser. But yeah, it makes good fireball though, and does real well. Yeah, generally speaking, absolutely, especially with wines, and again, it is definitely specific. So, um, except for I would say for everything except maybe grains, Yes, and it depends on what yeast you're using with the grains, right? So if you're using the EC 1118 or some other yeast, then absolutely you want it to go a little slower and lower temperature. But if you're using a daty yeast or a bread yeast and a little higher temperatures, they tend to go faster, and and it's not a problem, right? But for the most part, everything except for grains, all your fruits, definitely you want your fruits and your wines and your brandy, yeah, you definitely want those to go slower. But definitely the slower the better, 100%. I would say tequila and grain mashes tend to go pretty quick. Sugar washes and rums tend to go fairly quickly, just because of their high sugar content, and it's just a vigorous ferment. But if you can slow those down, I'm sure it would definitely help. Meads, slower is better. So it varies. It depends, on different ones are different. But yeah, especially for wines. Yeah, absolutely. 100% for wines. You don't want a wine fermenting off quickly. You definitely want to ferment in cooler temperatures in a basement. You want in the 70s, right? Low 70s even, EC 1118. A lot of people use that for everything, and that prefers 68 to 72 degrees. People are like, whoa, that's cold, right? So that's pretty low. And a lot of your wine and champagne yeast are going to be low like that, because that's what you want. That's how you get the character. But as Alan was talking about, when you bump that up, when you bump that temperature up a little higher, you start getting stress, but you start getting certain floral notes from it. And that's something that you'll learn once you start getting a little more advanced, and you've basically dialed in your recipe, and you can make certain changes to that recipe, and it will influence it in certain ways. So once you get dialed in like that, yeah, you can increase the temperature of the fermentation and speed it up and get floral notes and some sweetness that you may not have gotten if you'd done it slowly. So it's interesting. It's, again, no rules, right? You can throw a lot of the rules out, other than a lot of the safety things and a lot of the scientific facts. It's a lot of opinion, and it's a lot of taste. Some people would say, oh, it's wonderful, that's the best ever. And some people say, I just seen drink horse piss, so, it's nobody, everybody's different. Everybody has different tastes. So, that's one of the beauties of it. There's only a few set in stone factual things, scientific, especially the science part of it gets factual. But most of it comes into play is it's an opinion. How do you, flavor is not a fact. You can't make flavor a fact. I mean, some people like things that taste skunky. I mean, hell, skunky beer. Some people buy that shit and put lemons and limes in it to make it better and then convince themselves it's good. It's like, why are you having to put a lemon in your beer to make it better? If it's skunky and it tastes bad, why the hell? Get you a good stout or a good dark beer or something. But, everybody has different tastes and they love it. So, how can you, there's not much you can say, right? But yeah, generally speaking, slower is better especially for wines. Definitely wines and brandies and beers even. It's a beer maker talking out there. So, and your beers is different than a whiskey ferment. And even how they prepare it, they step up in temps when they're making beer mashes generally. And we, start high and go backwards. So, it's a lot different. They do all the rest, 100-degree rest, 120 to 30-degree rest, 150-degree rest, and, for proteins and everything. So it's different. Certification rests and stuff. It's definitely different. What's going on, Propane? Playing with the ultrasonic cleaner. It's fun to play with different woods at a time. I'm drinking it and getting it to my taste. Don't want to put it in a barrel. I've seen they did that on the show. I think on Moonshiners actually they used ultrasonic, and they say it works pretty well. So yeah, any way you can rapid age it, but it's still never going to replace that barrel. But there's a lot of different ways that you can manipulate it. I'd say that ultrasonic also helps evaporate a lot of the volatiles off, with that agitation. So you're going to get a little bit more agitation, oxidation, and you get some flavor changes with that alone. Plus, you'll get some of your volatiles come off, so um, you'll have a little bit cleaner sound. Yeah, hopefully copper goes back down. I'd like to see it go back down, but well, we've seen it in our lifetime. It's a lot of times once prices go up, they go up a lot quicker than they come down, if they ever come down. But with metals, I've seen a lot of fluctuations, over my lifetime, and hopefully the copper will come back down. But with all the technology and all the copper and gold and silver and platinum and other things needed in the uh, building of electronics and RAM and memory and motherboards and all that stuff, and all these AI data centers just full of gold, platinum, and silver, and copper, so it's definitely gonna increase until we find better um, mines, that have a higher percentage and a little easier and cheaper to mine it. Got you a 10-gallon still. That's still fine. That's fine. 10-gallon stills is good. I wouldn't go any less than 10. So I always tell people 10 or more. So yeah, you're in good shape. You'll get a few quarts out of it. Yeah, you'll get about 3 or 4 quarts. So you might get a gallon before and proof down to maybe a gallon and a half. So yeah, you'll be fine. Now, if it's one of the Vever 3 pots, then you're going to have to do some work. So I don't think I have a picture of a Vever 3 pot. Let me do that real quickly, because I want to show people. I want to show people. Let's see. Here's it's 5-gallon. I'll show that. All right. Shit. Let's see if it's going to let me take a screenshot. There we go. All right. Let me go here. Bear with me. This is a new computer, so everything's, but it is faster, so it'll be a little quicker. But I don't see. You go to users. I have to fix that. Let's see if it shows screenshots there. Nope. Is it public pictures? Nope. Yeah. Let me try that again, and I'll have to see where it saves it. So bear with me just a second. Learning to fly again here. Let's see. Annotate live on your screen. Quick markup. Let's see. Oh, that's cool. That's fine. Let me exit that. Let me open that. Do the screenshot again. Let's see where it puts that. Save. Local user. Oh, it's in OneDrive. Okay. I disabled OneDrive in my other one, so let me. My old one, I took the OneDrive out. I don't like all that gathering off your phone and everything else, putting it all in one place, and every other PC that's connected, it tries to grab all that info and stick it in there, and it's a little intrusive in my opinion. And it's not even. is. There it is. OneDrive, pictures, screenshots. Boom. There we go. Now this is what we call a Vevor 3-pot steel. You have a decent stainless pot, excellent, good stainless pot, a good gasket on it. So the actual cooker, and boiler part is fine, but that's where the fineness ends. Now you'll see that it has a little copper pipe coming up out of there. That's a little bit undersized for this size of pot. If this is a 10-gallon pot, that's like 3/8 inch line. It's creating some pressure inside your steel. And that pressure is not something that's good because it's harder for you to maintain a proper temperature when you got pressure increasing. So that again, you're getting a fluctuating temp. It's going up too high. It's wanting to go too high on you, and it's running too hard and fast and too much pressure. So you can replace this. So it's going into what's called a slobber box, puke pit, whatever you want to call it, that people call a thumper, but it's not truly a thumper. It's a slobber box unless you put the downcomer in there. And it's okay to sit that on top of the steel. That's fine. It's a little inconvenient and hard to work with, but if it sits up there, it's okay because the heat from the steel will actually keep that a little warmer, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's a good thing. So it's okay. That's where the okayness is. Now you'll see where these fittings go in, like the copper coming up out of that boiler. That's got a plastic fitting there, PTFT. I don't know. It's cheap, and the second you over tighten that, splits, and that's going to be a leak spot. So that's one spot that you'll start putting in the dough, right? You'll start making up a little thick dough with some rye or some flour and paste it in like they do on the show. So every time you get these leaks until you fix them, that's what you have to do, and it's a pain in the ass to clean. So those gaskets will snap on you in a heartbeat if you over tighten. If you over tighten them, they break. If you under tighten them, they leak. So there's your problem, right? It's a catch-22, right? So you go into the thumper or the slobber box, whatever you want to call it, and or how it's configured, right? And that's okay. And then it comes out of that into a grossly undersized copper coil. Nowhere near big enough for that 10-gallon Vevor pot with that little teeny tiny 3/8 inch worm that makes 3 spirals and then done, right? It's just not big enough pot, and the copper is not big enough. So if you want to start at the boiler, which is a good, perfectly fine boiler, and go with some 1/2 inch or 5/8 coming out of that with a new fitting and new gaskets that are good, awesome. And you can go into the same slobber box with this bigger, copper, and get rid of these flex pipes. And but the flex pipes are okay. They're just a little undersized, but go with the 5/8 or 1/2 inch at least, and increase the size of your condenser and get it away from the top of the steel because it's too hot, and that means that your condenser is going to run hot. You don't want your condenser running hot because if it's running hot, it's hard to keep cool. And if it doesn't keep cool, it doesn't condense properly, and the attenuation on your alcohol is not going to be good because it's going to be too warm coming out, right? So it's not the way you want it. The way it works with the fats, the esters, and everything, it's just coming out hot doesn't start the process and the molecularization of the distillate at a good attenuation. So also they put a valve on the top and bottom of the inlets going into the condenser pot, right? Why would you need a valve at the top? You feed your cold water into the bottom, it fills up and it drains out of the top. Why would you ever want to slow it out draining? I don't know, because you want it to drain as fast as it's coming in. That's the problem. You can't drain any faster than it's coming in, and you have to slow that down a lot because it'll overflow. So the biggest problem with these is the condenser, and that's why Fillbilly makes a bunch of condensers for these, and that's what everybody needs because it's grossly undersized. So you get you a 5-gallon bucket and some 1/2 inch copper coil. Don't try to buy the stick copper and bend it. It's a pain in the ass. You can buy it coiled up in a box. Soft copper is fine. You don't need hard copper like it's plumbing in a house under 100 PSI. We deal with 5 PSI, 3 to 5 PSI. So it's not a big issue, right? So yeah, this is the big. But after you do that, you got a perfectly fine pot. That's why I try to just steer people into getting these instead, because you don't have to put that work in. You got your perfect little whiskey cap on this one. You can take off this canister filter or a canister condenser. Uh, I'm used to canister filters in the fish tanks in the pool, but canister condenser, and get you a shotgun or a worm and go into that just the same, and do real good. And you can put your copper inside the football. And on the other one, on this one, if you want to, in this slobber box, you can put your copper mesh in there, and all that vapor is going through there. It's gonna go through that copper mesh too. So, but don't ever try to put copper mesh in these small copper lines. When we talk about, putting them in 2 inch, this is 2 inch around, right? So this is good sized stuff. So there's plenty of room for flow, around it, right? But in a half inch or a 3/8 inch line like this, no, you don't want to try to start putting copper mesh in there for the copper. No, no, no. Just put it in your slobber box or your thumper, And it's not all lost. If you got the 3-pot, it's not a bad thing. It's a great little boiler. It's a great value. It's just that you're going to have to put a little bit of work into it to make it, work right and to be headache free and safe. Because once these things start leaking, you got alcohol vapors coming out, and those are flammable. And if you're using, turkey fry or open gas or, gas on your stove to heat it with, you can make a flamethrower pretty quick, right? So, yeah, you got to be careful. But I'm glad you got that 10-gallon. I hope you got the football still, man. But if not, it's not the end of the world. We can get it modified and make it work. It's much better than the pressure cooker I started with. So you definitely heads and tails above what I started out with. That's what I started. I started out with pressure cooker on open fire, over coals. So yeah, it'll work. What does he do? I'm a little confused. I don't get. I don't have that channel, so I don't get to watch it. Oh, JB used to put them on his group, but I ain't seen him on there. I might have to go there and look in his files. He may be putting them on there, and I shouldn't have said that. OJB used to put him on there though. I like him. He's a good guy. That's a personal preference. It depends on the what you get. You can look through it, and if you look at your cracked corn and you got a lot of whole kernels in there and big huge pieces and not a lot of fine stuff, yeah, you can kind of run it through again and break it up a little better. But you don't want. I shouldn't say you don't want. I don't prefer a real fine, flour like consistency. Some people do. When it's the more you grind it, the easier it is to convert it, and the more it converts. But then again, it's the longer it takes to clear, and you might run into some scorching if you don't allow it to clear good. So, it's kind of give and take. If you can cold crash it and get it to clear pretty easily that way, it's fine. But a good coarse grind is what's best, in my opinion. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Heck yeah. You have to check him out. Yeah, I'd like to get down to his Arkansas festival. We go to the one in Clinton, but I'd like to swing over and check his out. They say it's a pretty good little festival. Cyrus, good guy, knowledgeable. I like his content and stuff. Doing a lot of the off the grid stuff. I dig it. I watch that. Yeah, yeah, it's for ratings. Yeah, they do a lot of fun stuff on there. It's silly stuff that nobody would ever do. Is cracked corn from TSC worth it? It depends. You never know how fresh it is, JJ. That's why I definitely you don't need a grinder right away. No, you can buy cornmeal and cracked corn and be perfectly fine, and you don't need a grinder right off. In fact, I went without one for years, but after buying one, it's like I kicked myself for not buying it sooner. Um, they have some good deals going on. You know, I think I paid a little bit more for mine than some of these Vevers that are going around now. I got a pretty good deal Black Friday. They used to be like 220, 240, and I'm seeing some now in the 140 to 70 range, which is pretty good value for some of the 3,000 watt Vevers. One of my buddies got one of those wet and dry Vevers that's a little bit higher end for like 170 some, and pretty nice. But yeah, once you get them, it's like, why didn't I do this? Especially if you do a lot, right? And I try to ferment um, a bunch at a time because of like I talk about the efficiency and the amount of work that goes into it. So, and you don't have to use it all at once. Everybody tries to think that I need a 20-gallon fermenter for my 15-gallon still, so I get 15 gallons out of my 20-gallon fermenter and be just enough. There's nobody that says you can't have a 50-gallon fermenter and run 3 runs of 15 and get you 45 and leave you 5 for the sour mash on the next one, right? And it'll last for weeks and months and years if you keep it covered and under an airlock even long time. So you and it clears better too. So you can just dip out of it as much as you need, run that, let it sit, dip it out. When you start getting low, mash in again, right? So it's a lot easier when you do it that way. I appreciate you, brother. I know. Heard people talk about humidity too when storing grains. Absolutely. Someone said should be 11% moisture, stored at 15%. Maybe we're finding it fresh, running harvest. Yeah, 16% is the cutoff. If if you have a tanker truck and it looks like a big milk truck, right, with a tanker or a gas tanker truck, they'll come in with a big, huge tanker full of corn, and the people at the distillery will go into that randomly, and it's got like 3 different areas where you can dig into it. They'll go in and pick out at different spots from that. They'll take those kernels up to the lab. They'll put it on a machine that measures exactly the moisture content in that kernel. And if any of those kernels is above 16%, they will refuse the whole load. And you will not sell that corn to them that day. You'll have to take it somewhere else. You'll have to take it somewhere and get it cracked, or take it somewhere and dry it a little better and then bring it back. But they won't accept that whole load if any of those kernels is above 16%, because above that percentage, it can start to mold and mildew, and then they keep it stored, and they don't want to have to dry it. They want to be able to maintain the moisture content that it has. So if it's above 16, nope, reject. So 15%, yeah, that's where you got that number, because if it's 16 or more, nope. If it's 15, then you're fine. So yeah, somebody was asking earlier about grits. I didn't know a lot of people didn't like grits. It's like, man, get some salt and cheese and cheesy grits. How can you not like cheesy grits, man? Come on. It's like not liking bacon. Right, Wormy? Yeah, you can get a bulkhead fitting. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, they call them bulkhead fittings. It's got like a gasket on each side and heat tight. I got some for my barrels just past week from for valves to put on my barrels, my plastic barrels. But yeah, just bulkhead fittings will work if you don't have somebody to weld them for you. Good point. I should have mentioned that. Should But I will say I would not use a bulkhead fitting for a heating element because a lot of those gaskets might succumb to the heat that you're going to run in that element. But for like drains and other things, it'd be fine. But I'd be worried about that high temp close to that gasket for that bulkhead fitting. So, but if you're running a bulkhead fitting for drains, absolutely. But I'd be real worried about that. I'm not sure how that'd work, bro. I haven't done it yet, so I don't know. But I've got my element and my SCR and all my stuff that I need to build me a little box and put it all together. Um, but I need to weld. I'm gonna weld. I've got a little TIG welder and a little plasma cutter, so I'm gonna cut me a little hole and weld my ferrule onto the pot and hope I don't blow through it right and have to patch it up. I'm not the best welder in the world, but it'll be all right. Um, Actually, I would probably, if you're just getting started, Donald, I wouldn't even use the thumper. You don't have to use that thumper. But I will say on that pot, if they're set up to catch, a lot of, we call it puking. So if you anytime you like boil water, it foams up, right? And the same thing's going to happen with your mash. It's going to foam up on you. It's going to, like you basically it's a beer, right? When we make grain fermentation, it's got all that carbonation from that CO2 in it. So if you taste it, it's kind of sudsy like a beer, and shaking up a beer, what that's going to do, imagine boiling it, right? So it's going to get a little foamy. So just, make sure you leave a little headspace, at the top, leave plenty of space for it to foam up. And the little thumper will work fine as a puke pot, right? So it'll catch a lot of that, right? Slobber box, puke pot, same thing. I always call it a puke pot, and they call it a slobber box nowadays. I don't know, but on top is fine, like it was in the picture. If this is what you've got, on top is fine. It's perfectly fine to run it just like that. But that condenser sitting on top there, you want to get that away from the pot. So, it's got that flex pipe. So flex that on over, away from the pot and in a cooler area, and it'll be a lot easier to regulate. Now you also notice that you can take like the plastic water bottles that we drink from, just the plastic water. Well, I don't have one sitting here, but just the plastic, the little ones you can crumple up waters that you buy. You can put them in the freezer. I open them up, pour a little bit of water out, so the water, when it expands, when it freezes, it won't split it. So, and put the lid back on once it's frozen, and you can set it. If you want to, you can adjust that little coil a little bit. Flex that copper and make it a little bit larger, and you can set that frozen uh, water bottle right in the middle of that copper coil, and that'll help keep it cool. And you can have like 5 or 6 of them ready to go because they'll eventually all the ice will melt, and you just take it out, put in another one, and you really need one for that because it's so undersized. But that's going to be the first thing really that you're going to want to upgrade on. That is, even before you upgrade your plumbing, you want to get that further away from it. If you want to get an extension piece, you can extend a little copper out a little bit further, or another flex pipe. But it's going to be a little bit of working process for you. But yeah, just getting that away from the top, the condenser will help a lot. The thumper on top's fine. You can run it just like it's plumbed in here. Uh, not a problem at all. And in fact, if you wanted to take that flex line and use a union and use both of those flex lines for the condenser and take it further and further away, and just, maybe make you a little extension for that solid copper piece that's coming up out of the boiler to go into the slobber box with, and make, extend it out a little bit, and then put an elbow there, or just gradually bend it into that and put a fitting there. And use both of those flex pipes to get your, copper condenser coil away from the thumper. That'd work. But it's not all lost. I mean, it'll make perfectly fine liquor. It's just, I'm glad you got a 10-gallon, because it's going to be a little easier for beginners to make your cuts in a 10-gallon versus a 5. So, yeah, you'll be all right. And, the best thing about it is you don't have a lot invested in it, and eventually that 10-gallon pot may be your thumper, for the next still that you get, because you may end up getting a 20 or 30 gallon one once you get the fever, and once you get the bug and the hobby. It's like, man, I need to upgrade, and a lot of people will go with a 20 or 30, to get more. So they don't want to run every damn weekend, right? So they want to get a little bit more volume, or they got a lot of thirsty friends. So, they have to up their game a little bit. And those pots make good little thumpers once you upgrade. But to put in the thumper when you're doing a run, if it's a grain, I put a little cream corn in there, man. You like it. If you're doing corn liquor, put you some cream corn in there, and especially with those 3/8 lines. That's why I talk about using an immersion blender, or put it in your blender and puree it up, because you don't want any corn kernels, right? Because that small of plumbing, a couple of corn kernels get, sloshed around and forced up into there, or that thumper start getting filled up and you don't know it, and some of those little corn kernels get clogged up in your line, and you start building up some back pressure. That's where accidents happen. So puree it up real good, get you some cream corn, put it in your blender, and blend it to where you can't see a kernel anymore, and it adds some good corn flavor, man. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, for beginners, I wouldn't charge it with anything but maybe some cream corn. But yeah, we used to put tails in it a lot, and that's where we'd run our tails and get the extra alcohol that way. And it's really what you want to put your tails, or you can just put your tails in with your, liquor or your mash that you're putting into the boiler. Don't put it in before you ferment it, but after you ferment and you're putting it in the boiler, you can put your tails in with that as well, and to get more volume, and to get more liquor out of them, because a lot of people stop at 80 proof, and that's what most bottles are that you buy. There's a lot of alcohol in those tails, so you definitely want to start saving those and rerunning them. Trying to get caught up. I wouldn't start with a cinnamon toast crunch. It's like I said, that cinnamon probably not going to agree with the yeast. They're not going to be happy together. But if you just had a little bit in there, I'm sure it would be okay. But if you just try to do cinnamon crunch alone, it might be a little bit much. But there's a lot of cereals out there, and you can get a lot of good cereals cheap, especially expired cereals. If you know people that own a store, moonshiners definitely need to start talking to store owners and fruit vendors, people who sell the fruit and in the fruit business. Because, a lot of that stuff, when it's expired, they're forced to throw it away. But, they can call and put a bug in here. I've got a box out here that I'm going to tell my helper, he's going to have to put it in the dumpster here in the next hour or so in case it goes missing. I guess it would, that would be the worst thing, So any expired cereal is just stale, and it still distills fine and it ferments fine. So, and the same with fruit, bruised fruit still makes good brandy and wine. It's that's actually rotting is part of the process. Decomposition is what happens in fermentation. So, you know, other than having fuzzy mold all over it, and if it does, just cut the bad part off and keep going, right? Because we're going to pour some hot water over it and we're going to kill all that off. So it's, that's not going to survive. And once that alcohol gets to a certain percentage, it'll kill it. And once we boil it in a boiler with boiling alcohol, that'll kill it. Most things now. But yeah, like fruit molds and all that stuff, don't worry about that. Cut it off, clean it, rinse it. It'll be all right. Especially distilled. Now, if you're doing a wine, that's a little different. But if it's something brandy, you're going to make a brandy, yeah. But for wine, yeah, try to get fresh fruit. Sour apple, yeah, that's what that is. That that green apple, sour apple. They do good though. If you haven't tried them, those Jolly Ranchers are pretty good mixed with a shine of neutral. I like them. Or you get just regular Kool Aid, man. I mean, you take Kool Aid mix with some sugar and sweeten it up, and that's what Damon does with his. Oh, that yeah, I did say happy birthday to Damon on it, but like his Sour Patch Shine that he makes, he gets some kind of. I think it's just maybe a type of Kool Aid or something like that, or some kind of drink, and mixes it and mixes with it's real sour, and I don't know. He might use some citric acid along with it to make it a little more tart, and then add some sugar to make it sweet and sour at the same time. It's pretty good stuff. Yeah, thumpers aren't, that's kind of an intermediate to advanced type of thing. And I'm not sure why they putting it on there still. I guess that the way they've got it configured, if you want to use it as a slobber box or puke pot, um, it works for that pretty well. And a lot of beginners tend to puke a lot, and they overfill the pot, so that helps. The safety factor. Plus, it catches a lot of that foam and helps it break down, and it gives it a place to go without going into condenser and ruining your run. So it does help. And if you just want to use it as a little puke pot, that's fine. Uh, but that being that small, I'd still be afraid it would fill up on me. And if that's the case, you have to stop your run, dump it, clamp it all back in, and start your run again. And it's not the end of the world if you have to do that. It's okay if you have to stop your run. It's fine to stop it and pick back up the next day. It doesn't ruin anything. It just takes more time. Is all, and energy. Yeah, 2 inches. 2 inch would be fine. Now I was talking about a column. If you want to do a column off that, I would definitely go with a 4 or 6. But yeah, just coming off and going into something else. Oh, column. Hold on, let me mute this here a second. I can figure out how to mute this thing. I haven't muted myself in a long time. Here we go. Okay, so anytime I mute myself, it defaults me to the other microphone. That's crazy. Come on, StreamYard. We got to work on that. Thanks, JJ. Got you, brother. Appreciate you. All right, now let me scroll up a half hour ago. That's where I was. Yeah, I got that call from Clint. That's usually what the case is. It's I need to watch the screen. I try not. I try to answer these questions as I can, and I just can't give a long winded explanation to all the questions and keep up with the chat. And we love your questions. We don't want to discourage those, so that's why Clint's here. He can give you the rapid fire, and I can give you the long winded. And good point. When you're using a thumper, you close the system. So and those little 3 pots, they don't come with a vent. They don't come with anything that you can vent it. So when you get done with your run on this 3 pot, um, these don't implode that easily. But once you turn your heat off, you got to turn the heat off, and then give it a few seconds to quit boiling, right? So we don't want any boiling stuff to come out. But then you can open up these, put you some gloves on, grill gloves, or some heavy gloves, and lift these little wire hangers that clasp. They're called hasps that hasp the lid down. Loosen those a little bit, open up some air, or you could just cut a hole in it and put you in a valve, right? Put you in a 1/2 inch valve and just with a handle and then little gate valve or ball valve, preferably a ball valve, and just open it up and let the steam out, and that way you won't worry about imploding. Because once you good point, once you add that thumper with a down comber, now these come basically without that one little short piece of copper. That's what that's for, is on the boiler side going into it, the side that's got this copper pipe, um, where it goes. You see how it bends and it goes up and then it's down straight into it. That's where you'll put that little short copper pipe in there with the silicone hose. Is on that side. You don't put it on the condenser side. You put it on the boiler side, and that little they call it a down comber, right? Without that, it's a slobber box or a puke pot. With that, it becomes a thumper. But yeah, with the 55, yeah, I wouldn't. It wouldn't be a thumper. It would be better as an infuser, right? So when we talk about jar rigs, where you do get a little bit of a second distillation in them, but they're not technically thumpers. They're mainly used for an infusion. So I wouldn't get jar rigs for to use as a thumper. Definitely going to be undersized, and it's something that you're going to have to change. What I would recommend doing is finding somebody that has an old Vever that's wanting to sell. You'll find them. A lot of people get in the hobby. They don't find us. They get frustrated. They listen to a lot of bullshit from other people. Their liquor sucks. They don't have a lot of success, and they find it's just a waste of time and money. It's cheaper just to buy bottom shelf liquor at the store and you know and do it that way. And it's sad. And that's one of the reasons that we're on here, so people can enjoy their hobby and be successful at it and enjoy it. And we want to share the knowledge. We want you to be able to make that good stuff and impress your friends and maybe even spawn a distiller. We've spawned some distilleries already, and hopefully some future distillers. So that's another big thing, is to keep passing the craft on. It's like Cyrus, his off the grid living stuff. It's and people that are talking about holistic medicine and people talking about canning, their food and growing food. It's just it's lost on our children, right? Most especially people in the city, you just don't have the place to do these things, right? But it's sad because hopefully things don't get bad, but if times get hard and things get bad, a lot of people are probably going to have to end up stealing to get what they can do because they don't have the knowledge to preserve and you know and prepare. So, somebody starves, you're not going to starve to death. So, you can't blame them, but people need to learn, how to can, how to preserve meats, how to hunt, how to butcher, how to smoke meats to preserve them, how to smoke fish to preserve, and how to be able to survive in tough times. Because, people that in my time and older, it's just a way of life. It was, especially where I grew up, you learned these things. It was something that you did. You died. You learned to hunt. A lot of people lived off the land. And a lot of people don't do that anymore. It's DoorDash. You don't have to go hunt. You just DoorDash in some chicken nuggets, right? So yeah, it's a lost art. So we want to help try to keep the craft alive. Actually, you have a higher proof when you use the thumper, because when you use the thumper, you're getting that. It's not a second distillation. It's actually distilling over again, but it's not like doubling. They call it a doubler, but it doesn't double the proof. But it does leave water behind. And anytime you leave water behind, you're increasing the proof, right? So it does increase your proof to have that thumper on there, which sometimes can be a good thing, and sometimes it's not so good. So again, it depends on the distillate. Some people with brandies prefer, and whiskeys prefer a straight run, and a lot of times people, with a higher proof vodkas or other things that, most people don't use the thumper though. They'll use a column. But for home distilling, they want, for getting higher proof or for infusing, is probably the best thing to use a thumper for these days. And that's probably what most people are using them for, is to either A, put their tails in to get more alcohol, or B, to infuse flavors with. And they're both great for that. It's great for that. But yeah, it'll take anytime you're removing water from your distillate, it's going to bump your proof up. Yeah, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. A lot of people get those old, smaller bevers. You'll find them online on Marketplace. People, sell them, get frustrated or upgrade, and they'll sell their little 5 gallons, and that's great for a 15-gallon keg, or for an 18 and a half bever, little 5 gallon pots, perfect size. Cut your little drain in it, put your little infusion, put you a ferrule in the top for infusing, and boom, you're good to go. Yeah, there's ways to get your proof without doing that. Second runs is a good way to up your proof. Now, when we say that, don't put, make sure you get your hydrometer, and don't put anything over 80 proof in there, right? So, 60 probably a good proof to stop at and be safe. And but you can take the 60 proof and that you run, proof it down with some water or whatever juice if you want to try to infuse some of that flavor, and then put it in your pot and run that, and you'll up your proof on that second run, and you'll get a little better, cleaner distillate as well. What size was it tapped to? Not sure what we're talking about. Um, on these pots, I think these are 3/8 coming out of here. I'm not sure, because I'm so far behind. I'm sorry, JJ. I'm so far behind. I'm not sure. Convection. Damn it, that far. Oh my God, I am that far behind. I'm sorry. I'm an hour behind, folks. Convection. My goodness. Hopefully, Clint's taking care of a lot of this. Is small talk. Wow. Yeah. If your corner's getting weevely, One thing I like to do with my corn is buy it in the fall and make sure you have an airtight. It has to be airtight. I don't mean waterproof. I mean airtight, not just waterproof. Waterproof can still let some air in. I mean airtight. But you get some of these. I think they're used for drugs to store and ship in these barrels, and they ship chemicals in them that they have to keep dry. And they have these bands and gaskets, and they keep shit dry and air free. But yeah, put your corn in that in the fall and leave it out for the in the winter. And once it gets below zero, if you're living in an area like me, or at least below freezing or close to it, it'll kill all the larvae and all the weevils off, and then you won't have to worry about anything in your corn other than the critters that get into it when you open it up to get your corn out. So if you let it freeze, then you'll go all spring and summer with weevil free corn, and just grind it as you need it. Bite in the kernels, it stays fresh, and grind it as you need. And if you can keep it inside and cold, in a cold inside place, that's even better. If you got a garage that gets freezing cold but dry, that's perfect. A storage building outside that's perfectly dry but cold as shit, that's where you want it. I'm gonna try to scroll through this really quickly. Yeah, for keg steels, absolutely. You know, that was my biggest qualm with my keg steel back in the days when I was using it, was it was hard for me to clean because I didn't have a pressure washer. I'd have to take the car wash and spray it out. But yeah, these days get you a 4 or 6 inch ferrule, 4 inch if you want to avoid big, huge expense on the reducer. 6 to 2 is a pretty expensive reducer, but 4 to 2, if you can buy the ferrules, and you can, you can solder the stainless to copper using specific solders and fluxes. Um, then with a torch, you can do that perfectly well with this. Like again, this is only 3 to 5 psi. It doesn't have to be, fire hose capable, right? It's just gotta just not leak, basically. Uh, and make you a reducer if you don't want to go to the expense of buying one. But yeah, having something that you can get in there and scrub around and clean out and drain, and yeah, it makes it much more enjoyable. That was my only um, problem and complaint with the keg steel, is this: it was so hard to keep clean because I couldn't get in there and scrub it, and I had to depend on a pressure washer, and I had to pay 50 cents every time I wanted to wash. Yeah, you'd think a 4 inch column would be twice as fast as a two. It's not. It is 4 times larger. So yeah, it's much difference. Yeah, those little gators get eaten, man. I tell you what, we went to Arkansas. I was talking about that festival in Clintonville, and they have some. I've had gator before, man, but it's just up here in Kentucky. You just don't get it a lot, right? And man, they had some gator bites. I don't know who the vendor was. Man, I got those things, and they were piping hot. Oh my god, they were so good. I'll tell you what, them old gators be scared over Santa if I lived down there around the bayou. I'd be hunting them down. I'd be poaching them some bitches. They're good eating, man. I like them. Oh, I haven't been doing my shots. Where the hell? The hell? Oh, here. Oh shit! Board out there. Have a little board propping up holding my keyboard and everything. Little honey shine. Thank you, Mike. Not much left. Get kind of low. Just saying. That stuff's getting better as it sits there too. It's had time to air out a little bit. Maybe some of those volatiles had a little bit of heads in it, but not bad. I'm not saying bad. But as it sat there, it's probably been a. Hey, babe, when did we go out and eat with Mike and Michelle? 3 weeks. About three or 4 weeks ago. It's definitely mellowed out. It's definitely mellowed out. So just a little time in a jar makes a big difference. You know, that's I've aired it out a little bit. That's why a lot of times too, if you see me blow in a jar before I drink it, that helps get some of those volatiles out of there. Yeah, Shadow gets you drunk, man. You better watch him. He's a good influence. Tyler, call back-to-back shots. Yeah. Yeah, I see what's going on. You want to see how red that nose will get, right? Man, it gets red as I start drinking. You can watch it light up like Rudolph. That's definitely this honey shine just need to age a little bit in that jar. It's marketably better now than it was. Not that it was bad. It was always good, but it had just a touch of very low heads right before the hearts. Might have been maybe a half of a pint, a little early, maybe a little less than that. But as it sat there, it's esterified, and a lot of those volatiles have aired out as I've opened it up. So, Mike, if you're listening, yeah, it's definitely improved a little bit over just a little time in the jar. That definitely a lot smoother, more flavorful. It's good. He's been at it about a year and a half. So, you know, it doesn't take long, especially if you listen and learn and have a pretty good palate, and you can taste these things when you're making the cuts. That's a lot, being able to make cuts, good cuts. Yeah, we thirsty. When you run a thumper, when I run a thumper, I was using a bypass. So all my four shots and all my heads don't even go into the thumper. They get bypassed directly into the condenser and condensed and pitched. And I don't try to rerun heads. A lot of people will. They'll do stripping runs and rerun those. And that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that at all. It's just not. It's fine. And it depends on what you're making. I will keep the lower heads that are close to the hearts and save those, especially if I'm going to barrel age something. But the high heads and the four shots, and then once I get to where the hearts are, I open that bypass up and then have that go into the thumper, and you won't get smearing, and you won't get a lot of that going through your tails or whatever you got in your thumper. If it's infusions or whatever, it's best to try to bypass those if you can. I know it's a little sophisticated, and the biggest danger is having all the valves off. If you get drunk and try to run it and you mess up and you have all the valves off, you're going to build up pressure, and it could get kind of dangerous. So there is a two-way valve that can either go one way or the other. And that probably my invention didn't have that. It's more expensive valve, Mine was kind of simple, just 3-gate valves, but you can use a two-way valve and then have, and just get by with two. And that works quite well as well. That way you'll always have one open, right? And it'll be going through one way or the other. Um, but yeah, you have to stay sober when you distill. You don't want to get drunk and distill at the same time. It's the worst thing you'd ever do. There's time to drink and there's time to be serious, and it's bad enough just kind of tasting and sampling as you go and trying to make cuts. You get pretty hammered doing that. But if you're sitting there drinking to be drinking, you shouldn't be distilling. Don't drink and distill, because it's easy to pass out, and because you got that high proof coming off there, it's easy to over drink it and easy to pass out. Sit there on Facebook while you're waiting, and next thing you know, you're asleep. Things are burning. It can be very dangerous. So it's something you got to take seriously, and that's one of the reasons that we're here, trying to make it a safe hobby too. So while you're buying your equipment, buying that fire extinguisher should be on your list of equipment. Got JJ singing Elton John. Uh-oh. You've been drinking. How many shots you had, JJ? I need to get caught up. Oh, JJ. But if you're talking about making cuts and tasting and smelling, yeah, you will do that the same. So I bypass my thumper, and I'll wait, and then when I get to the hearts, I open up my thumper. If you don't have the bypass and you're running that, that tastes a little bit different than the last. I don't know. It's strange. Just running straight thumper, yeah, you'll do it the same, but you will get smearing, and but you'll make your cuts the same. It won't be as cut and dry as it can be, like when you just run it straight through and run your bypass and just distill and condense until you hit those hearts. Open up your valve, send your hearts into your thumper and to infusions or whatever that you have in there without, getting those in it. It'll make it cleaner. It cleans it up a little bit. Is it a must? No, you don't have to have it, but it definitely makes using a thumper a little easier. And also any thumper that's worth the salt will have a drain on it. That way you can drain some off as you need to. That way you'll never feel it, because a lot of times thumpers don't get hot enough and they start building up and they can overfill. That's why you want to properly size it. But if it's not properly sized, having that drain in there is a big plus. The difference I think you're talking about fours and heads. Fours is methanol. Basically, 4 shots is methanol. Heads are ethyl acetates, acetaldehydes, lots of other chemicals, isopropyls, a lot of different other alcohols, higher volatiles than ethanol. So it's stuff that has a lower boiling point that if it were fractionally distilled would come off first, but because we're dealing with an azeotrope, they sometimes you'll find it throughout the run, but generally a higher percentage will come off earlier. But yeah, it's a lot of different acetone type stuff, acetaldehydes, yeah, ethyl acetate. But methanol is what your 4 shots are. And that's the very first little bit that everybody tosses. After that, it's heads. You can drink heads. It's just going to give you a headache. It's not going to kill you. It's not going to cause you to go blind or any of that. That's just the methanol that comes off first, the 4 shots, and you would have to concentrate those, and before it's going to affect you that way. In other words, you'd have to capture 4 shots, and just the 4 shots of each run, put that into a still, distill the 4 shots, save the 4 shots of the 4 shots, and then distill it again, and then maybe you're getting to the purity that it can do something to you. So, if you think about it, when you're drinking wine and beer, you're getting all that, right? Because you're not separating it. It's still in there. So, Rhizopus. Y'all getting silly. It is time. Here we go. It's the shop bell. I got a little catching up to do. I was way behind. I'm getting there. I'm at 10:22. It's 10:50. So I'm still freaking 30 minutes behind. Well, I'm just now getting to where the racist got banned. People are stupid, man. It's usually a bunch of freaking kids, too. Hello, Miss Tammy. Oh, it was nice down there in Lancaster today, wasn't it? Good to see you. Yeah, if you get a 55, I'd go with a 4 minimum. Definitely nothing less than a 4. But if you're just coming off, you're talking about plumbing coming off. Yeah, a 55 with 2-inch plumbing is about like a 5 or 10-inch barrel with 3/8. It works, but not optimal. But yeah, you'd be fine with 2-inch coming off that. Just for piping, going into a thumper or something else, yeah. But if you want to do a column, definitely go to 4 or 6. Probably 6 would be best coming off that, but definitely no less than 4. I wouldn't try running that on a 55. I mean, you could, but yeah. For personal, generally SS, what we consider personal, a lot of this has been something that's talked about for the last 20, 30 years. Hobbyists, generally 30 gallons or less is what's considered a hobby still. But because the 55-gallon stainless drums are so readily available and you can get it, a lot of people don't like distilling all the time. It's whether you like distilling for a hobby or you're distilling to make enough liquor for you to drink for the next few months. Some people just want to run once or twice a year and they don't like having to run all the time and they don't like taking up their time. They just want to make their liquor, bottle it up, put it in a little barrel and go back to, watch their ball games or doing whatever, going to the soccer games with their kids, whatever. And that's understandable. So those people will generally want a little bit larger still so they don't have to do it as often. And they can fill their barrels pretty easily. But people that more into it, more into the craft, and tend to, unless they got a lot of thirsty friends, we got all the guys coming over for the games every week. You go through quite a bit of liquor pretty quick, and once your buddies find out that you're making liquor and it tastes good, you have a lot more friends than you thought you had. Right? Start making a lot of new friends. So, you may have to up your game for that too, because everybody's coming over and getting drunk and hanging out and playing cards and watching the games and whatever. So, of course, they're going to want you to sell them a little bit and send them home with a little, little something. And that's cool too. If you want to send them home with something, we don't talk about selling on here. We can't do that, but, barter, barter. But yeah, the 30 gallon has traditionally been considered, any 30 or less is considered the hobby. But again, because 55-gallon drums, you can pick them up pretty inexpensively in relative comparison to a 55-gallon copper steel, a lot cheaper, right? So anything over that would definitely be, more commercial. But I've seen commercial distilleries operating on 20, 30-gallon pots, right? So there's no rules. But generally 30 gallons or less has traditionally been what's considered hobbyist or home distilling and hobby. And, out of my 18.5 gallon, when I run about 15 gallons, you're going to get 2.5 gallons of distillate, probably 2.5 to 3 once proof down, right, of product. Closer to 2.5 once you cut out, your fours. And if you're running tails again, that's why I get a little higher number. So that helps a lot. Definitely helps when you run your tails, so you get a little more production, a lot more. So I always teach that when you do it, when you start doing it, you really realize how much more you get. And you'll be like, I wish I'd have been saving them tails a lot longer, because I'm getting a lot more liquor than I used to. And it's easy to pull those hearts out of those tails. So, but yeah, about 30 or less is generally considered hobbyist. Brother, I can take you from planting, if you we can talk about planting the corn to harvesting to grinding to drying out. We can help you, man, the whole every step of the way. We've actually, helped spawn, some distilleries. I'm not saying just what they learned from us. So they listen to us, they learn, they do their research, right? But open a distillery, you got to learn business, because you can understand everything that we do. And Clint's worked at a distillery, and I've been at it since maybe 50 years now. So a lot of knowledge, but still, if you don't have the business sense, you can make the best liquor in the world and still be selling your equipment at auction within a year if you don't know business. So learn business, learn marketing. Um, it's a tough. It's not as easy a business to get into. I don't want to discourage anybody, but there's a lot of people out there with that same dream and goal in mind. So my biggest advice would be learn as much about business as you do about distilling if you want to be successful, or find a good crew, find some people that you can trust, that are knowledgeable, that can handle that aspect for you, and that you can be partners with. But it's tough being a partner. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't recommend getting anything less than a 10. And if you do, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's just that you're going to upgrade. Once you start making some liquor and you got the 5 gallon pot, and you're only getting a quart and a half quart, you have to run a lot to keep up with your drinking habit, right? And if you got thirsty friends, you're going to be distilling a lot. You're going to be running that thing every day. Um, so it's tough, but it'll get you in the hobby. It'll get you into the process. You'll learn a lot, and you'll use that as your thumper, right, for your next seal. So it's not all bad. And thumpers definitely have their purse. Deboss, yeah. Um, Hello, Miss Lisa. How are you? I'm sorry, I'm 25 minutes late saying that. Now, the columns are for higher proof. So something like this is great for making your higher proof vodkas and things like that. But it's a tool, right? So you wouldn't use a saw to put down shingles, right? So this is a different tool. It's for high proof stuff. So it's not really designed for, just regular stuff that a normal cap would do for you, like the cap that's on this. See, this football is what we call a cap, and that has a little bit of passive reflux, but nowhere near as much. So you're getting a distillate coming off there with a little bit more water and quite a bit more flavor, which can be a great thing and it can be a bad thing. It depends on what you're making and what you got going into it, right? So um, they're all just different tools, right? And the thumper is just another tool. It's not something that you want to use every time you run. And a lot of people fall into that. They use the thumper every time they make a run. And that's not what thumpers are for. It's just simply not necessarily what you want to do, for every different distillate that you make. Sometimes it'd be better to cut that thumper out and put some infusion rigs in there instead. Sometimes it's better just to run straight into your condenser, instead stripping, or other purposes. So different methodology for different distillates. So it's just different tools for different things. So the column is great for stripping, and it's great for stripping flavor and bumping up the proof. They're great for that. I've got a setup that I can divert. I've got valves and things set up. I can go into my column to do high proof, or I can come out the side and go low proof straight into condenser and strip off. And then once I get to what I want, then I can, run it through a column or through an inline infuser, right off the column or whatever, so once you start using the tri-clamp, ferrules and the tri-clamp modularity, it's the whole new game, man. It's just, it'll open up a lot of creativity for you to create a lot of different methods for doing it. And that's one thing I've kind of been known for is creating a lot of different setups, using valves, like my bypass, and I've taken that to a whole new level now. That was something I did in the 80s. Now with the modularity of ferrules, I've got anion infusers. I've got, I can run strip off one side and then, put it back in the same pot and then run it through an infusion on the other side just by, changing some valves. So I'm like Willy Wonka, changing valves here and there. It looks like, kind of looks like a oil refinery, a refinery with all the pipes and everything, but everything has a purpose. People look at it and they'll be like, there's no way I could run that. It's confusing to me. I don't know what I'm looking at. But once you understand the methodology behind it, it all makes sense. So, but it's, that's that rabbit hole Sheen was talking about. I'm deep, man. I'm deep down that hole. Yeah, I don't use thumper most of the time. Hardly at all. I like infusers much better than thumpers. Awesome. Yeah, yeah. It's different. Uh, just regular moonshine. It comes right off the tap, so it's not a seasoned liquor, right? It's kind of like eating a noodle without any cheese sauce on it or any pasta sauce or any kind of, it's just that noodle. So some people love the noodles just straight without anything, a little butter, but a lot of people like the sauce, right? So putting in a barrel, that adds some spice, right? So a lot of, it's not a finished liquor. It's a white dog, and it's the basis of a lot of other things, right? So it's not for everybody. Moonshine isn't for everybody. Corn liquor, is not necessarily for everybody. You can take it on up to higher proof and make a vodka out of it. Plenty of corn vodkas and wheat vodkas out there, and that's a more refined product, right? Or you can barrel age it, or you can start with fruit and infuse some fruit flavors, make some tasty brandies. So, just a plain shine straight off the tap. A lot of people like it because it's generally high proof, and it'll lubricate you pretty quick, right? But for more sophisticated palates, a lot of people would prefer a little aging on wood, a little, little pinky in the air, putting it on some wood, or maybe even just something simple as throwing some Jolly Ranchers in there to flavor it up a little bit, make some different flavors. That was never heard of 20 or 30 years ago. Nowadays, it's what everybody likes, and drinking has changed a lot. There's fewer people drinking now than ever, and the ones that are, they like a lot of the flavored stuff. I go to all these festivals, and you think everybody's wanting the bourbons and the whiskeys and the aged stuff and the white dog, and they're passed around jars of Kool-Aid and Jolly Ranchers and stuff, which is great. I love the flavor. I love the sweetness and the uniqueness of it. To me, it's totally different, right? But it's once you make it, like we talked about earlier, you become a bartender and flavor it, right? Make it sweeter. And I guess that's for people that just don't like alcohol, right? They like sweetness and they like when it tastes like something else. But yeah, moonshine is just something that's not taxed, so it kind of falls into that catch-all. So we can be making tequila, we can be making rum, we can be making vodka, and it's still all considered a moonshine. Right, just untaxed liquor. So my thoughts are, if somebody wants to call it moonshine and they go through the same steps that they did before they started paying a tax, just because you pay a tax on it doesn't make it any different, right? If they want to call it a shine, they can call it a shine. But traditionally, moonshine has been an untaxed. And, like I said, we distill so many different things, it all falls under that same moniker. We don't call it moonshine tequila, moonshine rum, moonshine vodka, moonshine corn liquor, moonshine brandy. We just call it moonshine, no matter what it is. That's kind of pop. Saying pop instead of Coke, Pepsi, or 7-Up. It's all pop. Yeah, when you're still on the grain, it retains a lot of flavor. So you're going to get more flavor distilling on the grain than you would not. Problem being is when a lot of times if you don't do it properly through the right equipment, you'll scorch that grain and ruin it. That's one of the few ways that you can really ruin a batch. I mean, you can, you know, not come up with a lot of proof, run it again and again and get your proof up. You can do so many things. You can come out even tasting bad and clean it up with a column, right? And up the proof and just eliminate a lot of the water, which carries a lot of the flavor, good or bad. But once you scorch it, there's really not much you can do. It's pretty much a lost ball, and you're just going to have to choke it down or pour it out, kill weeds with it, or light your charcoal. It's getting about 11 o'clock, and I'm about to catch up. Imagine that. Man, no, I'm not. After I scroll down, it keeps popping up on me. Oh, shit. Yep. Hopefully I didn't scroll past the question. Yeah, they did. And it's tough times. There's some places that are still dry. All right, let's do another shot before we go. Yeah, there's still some places in the United States that's dry. The place where I grew up, I mean, moonshiners everywhere and bootleggers everywhere. Uh, I mean, I was 12, 13 years old riding my bicycle to the bootleggers, getting half pints and pints early times and beer and whatever we wanted, and they didn't give a shit. I mean, liquor stores, at least they card you, they're not going to let some 12, 13-year-old come in there and buy liquor. Hell, them bootleggers didn't give a shit. Yeah, as long as you gave them real money, they don't give a damn. And I probably thought it was the funniest thing ever. We'd pedal our ass up there and go get it. Then we learned to make it. That I still, end up getting because I liked whiskey so much. And I didn't have any idea how to make whiskey and age it. For gin, I mean, you can use a different setup. You need an infuser, right? You need something, a gin basket, or some way to infuse the botanicals and spices and herbs that you're going to botanicals that you're going to to flavor it with. So you're going to need a way to do that, and a way would one way would be an infuser, and you want to be able to steep through that infuser without a lot of botanicals getting carried over. So might have some screening or something involved. A lot of people will run their vapor through a chamber that has it similar to an infuser, and some will just have a basket suspended in the cap. Um, and as long as it's done right, that works pretty well. Um, but then again, if it's just hanging there and you got vapor going up on each side of it, you're not going to get that concentration really that you need. So it does require a little bit of special um, tools or a little special setup to get that infusion and to have a pocket on this little. I'm sorry, I had this up there the whole time, but inside this football on this whatever, at the very bottom of it, some screen. Now you could put a little bit more screen in there, or you can hang a basket inside this little football and make a decent little small, infusion chamber out of it. That works. People have done that. So there's a lot. And I'm sorry I left that up there. It's hard for y'all to read these comments. I know when that's there. Light brown cane sugar, awesome, and yeast. That's all. I would get some oyster shells. Go to the feed store, and this is something that you're going to use a lot. So and if you have gardens, it's great for your tomatoes and other plants as well. If you start getting calcium deficiencies, but get you some crushed oyster shells, and they're real cheap. They're like $12, $13 for a 40, 50 pound bag. Sometimes maybe $14 for a 40, 50 pound bag. And again, they last forever. So that you may never have to buy them again unless you do a lot. And you can reuse them. So you put them in a cheesecloth pouch, a couple of handfuls. I'm not sure how much you're doing, but proportionally, for a 20-gallon run, a couple of handfuls wrapped up in I boil them, clean them up a little bit, boil them, dry them out, and then put them in a cheesecloth pouch. And when you're done with them, boil them again to kill off any bacteria and clean them up, spray them, clean them, let them dry. But it'll buffer. What happens is when you're doing rums or sugar washes or even tequilas, they ferment really fast, and that fast fermentation process, the chemical process, creates more organic acids. It's just a natural byproduct of the fermentation process. It becomes more acidic as it ferments. So something that you can do to combat that and to prevent it from pH crashing, meaning your pH is going to drop to such a low point that it stresses or kills your yeast, would be to add those oyster shells in there, and they don't change the flavor any, so it's not going to affect anything that you're distilling. Now, I wouldn't use them for a wine or a beer, but for something that we're going to distill and like a rum, absolutely, and it'll help keep your pH from crashing because of that fast, vigorous fermentation that you'll have with those sugars. But yeah, it's if now having a little bit, if you wanted to get a more rum taste, you can add some molasses. You can get you a little jug of molasses and pour a little bit in there and kind of stir that in with the hot water. You definitely don't want to scorch it, right? It's easy to scorch because it sinks to the bottom. It's thick. To melt it in some hot water and add that, and it'll give you a little more grungy, good grunge flavor that you might be looking for. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Yeah, we've all done it. I use dark brown sugar. I think you said light brown. Yeah, you can just use the dark brown and not need the molasses, or you can use the light and add a little molasses to it to get a little more grunge. Making sure it's Clint not sending me messages. Got somebody else saying stuff. Um, but yeah, make you some good rum. Now I will say, uh, they make yeast specifically for rum. If if you want to try to get some of that, it will help ferment all the way down, and you'll get some of those unfermentable sugars from the brown sugar that might not otherwise ferment. Or if you want to just throw in a little glucoamylase, that'll help as well. But it's not a must. It's not a have to situation. There's nothing gonna, there's no rules on that. Um, but anytime you distill something that has a lot of sugars in it, you got to be careful not to overheat it, or you might get some of that burnt sugar taste. But no, it's perfectly fine to make a brown sugar rum. My microphone just flashed, colors flashed on it. Is this still working okay? That's weird. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And let us know how it turns out. Yeah, get those Sweetwater. All right, it's getting late, y'all. This ain't Saturday night now. It's Tuesday. I'm about to get off here soon. Hands got to go to bed. There's no rules. There's only a few. There's only a few scientific facts and rules and safety things, that you've got to kind of practice to be on the safe side. But one of the beauties of these things is it's open. It's an art, it's a craft, and you can make it your own, right? You can create and do things that are different, and that's what everybody's trying to do. That's the big thing. Everybody's trying to come up with something different that nobody's ever done before, and that's why I get questions all the time. And I mean, I'm not laughing at anybody if you've asked these questions. I love it. It's awesome. But every fruit and vegetable on this planet has been tried, unless you're getting some really unique Amazonian tribal fruit that nobody's ever seen. Most everything has been tried. Um, the only thing I talked to him a little while back, and I shouldn't. That's pretty long. I'll save that for some other time. But yeah, it's a long drawn out thing. It's pretty funny though. People were talking about getting. I'm gonna have to tell it. So my daughter was doing a class, and she was dealing with this worm secretions, and I found out that they're that you probably could make a worm secretion ferment, right? That's that's something might not have been tried, but I mean they've made elephant dung gin. They've fermented cow shit, elephant shit, lots of animals shit. They put cat turds in coffee, man. I mean, there's so many things that have been tried. It's really hard to do something that's never been tried before. But the way you do it, you can make it your own. You can make your own recipe and do it yourself, and it can be unique. Just like my bypass, I'm sure somebody else has done that before that's never seen mine and just logically thought it out and done it. And based on some of the setups from the 1800s, there's no doubt that somebody did that back then, right? It's just it wasn't something commonly practiced in the shine community and in the craft and small distilleries. Larger distilleries use diverters and retorts and things that are kind of like it but different. But yeah, I'm sure somebody somewhere else has tried it. But when it comes to vegetables and fruits, it's been tried. If it grows on this planet, they've tried to make a wine or a liquor out of it. Trust me. That's absolutely right, Clint. Your questions are this show. This show isn't the Clint and Joe show. It's not the Santa show. This is the show that you all get to ask your questions, and you are the stars. You get to ask the questions. It's all about what you want to know and what you're learning, and bringing your success stories and bringing your failures, and we figure out how to make them better and teach you how to do things safely. But it's all about you. We got other shows that more about who we're interviewing, or we get people on there from Master Distillers, and Roger and I did that for a long time, bringing people from the show. A lot of fun. Met a lot of cool people on Master Distillers and on the show, and that was all great. But this is something that needs to be done for the hobbyists and for you, right? You're all the whole reason that we're here. So without you all, we wouldn't have a show. We'd just be sitting here twiddling our thumbs with no questions and nobody to talk to and no beginners to help, and intermediates and advanced as well. So, our dream is to help pass the knowledge on and to help, spawn some distilleries and some future distillers, master distillers, right? Yeah, Jesse's a great guy. Alan Bishop and Lisa Lowry is a gin master too. Lisa makes some top. She's won some prestigious awards with her gin. If you don't know Lisa, yeah, she's something else. She makes some really good stuff. And Mia Pratt from the show, she was on Still Talking a few weeks ago, and she's really big into gin, a very, very knowledgeable gal as well. So, yeah, there's a lot of good gin makers out there. Oh, Philbilly makes some good gin. He sells botanicals and everything you need to make a lot of gin. Philbilly's made quite a bit of gin and good gin. I tell you, rums, making spice rums. There's, I tell you, old Sandman, old West makes some really good spice rum. As does Shauna, Big Beard and Steel Wheel, the Shauna. She makes some good gin, really good gin. So, yeah, there's a lot of gin makers out there. All right, y'all. I'm glad y'all tuned in. Yeah, we're all here to help everybody, and we're glad that y'all came. And bring your friends. Share it with other friends that may be wanting to get into the hobby. I like getting some new people in. I saw a new face or two tonight, and that's good to see. But we definitely, the Big Easy and Philbilly banner, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it is a lot of fun. And West, they all get together, and yeah, it's a good time, man. Them's my brothers. But yeah, it's great having y'all, and happy rest of your week. I get to go to the dentist Thursday, and that's always fun. So hopefully by Saturday I won't be swollen, and I probably need a little drink or two to get rid of all that pain. Lisa did? Yeah, she's awesome, man. And our Lisa, she's very knowledgeable, making tinctures and gins. Absolutely. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you cats Saturday, unless you tune in Friday. Not sure what we got going on this Friday. Let me look here real quick on the Militia page here. Of course, they don't have me pinned in on Tuesdays. I had to talk to Damon about that. So y'all want to put a bug in his ear saying, why ain't Sam on Tuesday? Maybe he can tell you. I don't know. But let's see. Today's the 10th. Damn, I'm going to have to get the old magnifying glass. This new monitor, everything's small. Looks like American Moonshine. So, is that right? Yeah, American Moonshine. So, American Moonshine will be on. They'll be chatting. But anyway, we will see you cat Saturday. Till then, everybody have a great rest of your week. And stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you Saturday at Eastern. Till then, shine on. Peace out. Appreciate y'all.